This little story is from 2012. I live in Canberra, Australia. We're an incredibly boring place 99% of the time. Not much happens, but when it does, everyone hears about it. I just started year 11 at a new school. The last 2 years of high school are done at a separate school, which we call college, to year 7 to 10. Everyone's about 16 to 18 at this campus. I was a bit of an overachiever when it came to English, so I was placed in a class of 6 or 7 other overachievers in an experimental English class taught by the deputy principal in charge of my grade. Basically, rather than physical books and assignments, the school wanted to trial a totally digital format, which I hated, by the way. We worked almost exclusively on our personal iPads that we had to bring to each lesson. Even though the class was small, I don't remember much about most of the kids. They weren't particularly interesting, I guess. I kept to myself after the collapse of my high school friendship group and sat next to the other quiet kid in this particular class. I'll call him Jimbo. Jimbo was even quieter than me. I got myself in trouble a couple of times for challenging the teacher's views, but I honestly do not remember this guy ever saying a word. One lesson for some reason that escapes me where we were discussing our pets. Jane talked about her cat, Bob about his dogs, whatever. It was one of the few times I contributed without challenging the teacher even. Jimbo still said nothing, just flicking idly through his iPad and leaning back on his chair as he very often did. A couple of weeks into the year, I finally found a few new friends to hang out with on breaks. Jimbo was absent from class, and then the next and the next. This kid just disappeared, and after another couple of weeks, I asked the deputy where he was. This dude hated me, so he literally rolled his eyes, shoved past, and said nothing. I shrugged it off because I knew the teacher was a dickhead, but I was still curious. I brought it up to my new mates because it's not common around here for a kid to just stop showing up to school. We're a small city. Someone always knows something. If he'd moved schools, someone would have heard. There had to be some kind of explanation for the sudden extended absence. One of my new buddies took me aside. I'll call him Jerry. Jerry was a good, goofy guy. He was the type to always joke around, so when he pulled me aside all serious, I knew that something was off. Jerry and Jimbo had been friends back at their old high school. At some stage over the summer holidays when Jerry had visited him, Jimbo had spilled a glass of milk in his kitchen. Jerry laughed about it, but Jimbo demanded he clean it up, even though Jerry obviously wasn't the one who made the mess. Jerry turned his back, and the next thing he knew, Jimbo had a knife to his throat and made him clean up the spill at knife point. But it gets worse. So much worse. He tells me that Jimbo's iPad was absolutely packed with videos. Videos of him doing the most disgusting subhuman things to animals. Primarily dogs. I physically can't bring myself to write the specifics of what he did to those poor souls. Think the BTK killer, but without the people. He'd been stealing them from backyards and luring strays. There was even a teacher at the school who'd come to find out why his dogs were going crazy so late, and then he saw Jimbo scamper off into the night. There was a vast paddock not far from the school that I used to go smoke weed in, because the grass was tall enough to keep us relatively well hidden from the rest of the world. Absolutely huge, a good kilometer square if not more. That specific paddock in question I learned had been his killing fields. I was just getting high in the opposite corner, closer to the houses that lined one side. If we decided to venture diagonally across for whatever reason, we very possibly could have come across something he'd done. The iPad that he'd recorded it all on had been less than a foot away from me for weeks. He'd flicked through the images of what he'd done so casually in that little classroom of 6 or 7 students. Hell, he knew that each one of us had pets. He also had a bucket list found on the iPad, the top item of which was graduating to killing humans. From what I know, Jimbo was convicted for animal cruelty, and nobody's heard of him since. I'm a 25-year-old female, and this happened maybe 8 to 9 years ago, and I was 16 to 17 years old then. I'm from a small village, and I went to school in the nearest big city, which was about 40 kilometers away, about 25 miles. Because public transportation was so bad, I had no way to get home unless they came for me, or I had to walk 4 kilometers. I lived in a dormitory during the week in the city where I studied. I stayed in the city during the week and went home on Fridays, then back again on Sundays. I always get off the bus at the main station when I arrive in the city around 2 p.m. My boyfriend, who came from another town, also studied in the city. He came by train. Every Sunday I waited for him at the station for about an hour and a half and then went to the dormitory together. That day was no different. I was waiting for him sitting upstairs at the station in a spot where I could see the entire ground floor from above. I had my headphones in and on my phone just sitting there. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a homeless woman wandering around. She sometimes stood still and looked around, but I didn't pay much attention. There are a lot of homeless people in that area. Time passed. I was still sitting, headphones on, phone in hand. Then I saw the homeless woman start walking in my direction. I still didn't think too much of it. When she was about a few feet away from me, I noticed she was talking to other people who were sitting nearby, probably asking for money. A few moments later, she had started walking toward me again. I saw her, but I didn't lift my head. Then she stopped in front of me. That's when I looked up. She just stared at me. Her eyes looked like she was high on something, and she was slightly swaying. She was dirty, honestly disgusting to look at. Some green liquid was dripping from the corner of her mouth, and her face was dirty. She wore a thick coat, gray pants, black boots, even though it was spring, and had a black backpack. She had brown hair, brown eyes, looked around 40 years old, though she could have been younger. I saw her lips moving. She was talking to me. I took out my headphones and gave her my attention. I'm not a rude person, and I always try to speak kindly to people. But when I removed my headphones, she just went silent, just stared at me. "What? Could you say that again?" I asked her. Then she spoke again, but I didn't understand a single word, just mumbling. She stared at me with those glassy eyes. I just shook my head. "Sorry, I can't understand what you're saying," I told her and looked at her. At this point, I felt my heart beat faster. I got scared. I didn't know what she wanted, and something about her made me feel really uncomfortable. She started mumbling again, and while she mumbled, she began searching for something in her coat pocket with her right hand. I looked down at her hand to see what she was doing or what she wanted from me. At this point, I thought maybe she needed help with something. I looked back up into her eyes and waited to see what was going to happen. Then I saw her pull her hand out of her coat and look down at her hand again. She was still mumbling. I then saw a piece of glass in her hand. She slowly slid it up under her coat to her forearm, holding the sharp end in her palm. It was pretty big and sharp, probably about 6 inches. That's when I realized something was very wrong. My eyes widened. I was scared. I asked her one last time, a bit more irritated now. "What do you want from me?" I knew that there were people around. It was a train station in broad daylight, so I didn't think she would actually do anything. Well, very suddenly, she stepped toward me and pushed the glass toward me, right toward my neck. I reacted immediately. I jumped up in time, pushed her away, and yelled at her. "What the hell are you doing?" She started mumbling more angrily. I had no idea what she was saying. My whole body was just shaking, and I was terrified. I grabbed my travel bag quickly, all while keeping my eyes on her. She was still mumbling angrily, holding the glass shard in front of her, staring at me. "Leave me alone! Go to hell!" I shouted at her again, and as I rushed off, I saw that everyone at the station was now watching us. I ran outside the station and saw some police officers nearby. I felt relieved. I walked toward them, but I didn't say anything. I knew that if I told them, they'd probably just tell her to leave and that would be it, so I just stayed close to them. A few moments later, I saw the woman come outside too. She was walking in my direction, angrily looking at me. I didn't see the glass in her hand anymore. I grabbed my bag and walked to a different part of the station courtyard where she couldn't see me. I was trembling, scared, and in shock. I never saw her again. A little bit later, my boyfriend arrived and I told him what happened. He was surprised and worried too. He told me to never wait for him at the station again, and I didn't. From that point on, I always waited for him at the dormitory. Even now, every time I go to that station, which is rare, I always get anxious and stay alert. I still live in that city now, even after finishing school, and I'm still with my boyfriend. We live together. Just knowing what could have happened there if I hadn't reacted in time or if I had just ignored her, it still scares me. This may sound bad to some. It might sound harmless to others, but I was never found out about these things. It wasn't illegal as far as I can tell, but I'm not sure what I'm about to say counts as. I just really want to talk about it though. If my post is removed, I'll understand. This all happened when I was 15 to 17. I was in middle school to start off. I had very few friends and my family life was not that great either. I didn't feel alone, nor did I want any friends. I just wanted to get the school day over with and be alone in my room. I had no bad thoughts before these years. I was going to second period math when I saw him, a guy around my age, tall with blonde hair. He was very quiet, but he had many friends when I saw him at lunchtime. I had never paid him any mind before, but something about him made me feel weird. Like I wanted to get to know him, to speak to him, and to be near him. I must confess, before this, I had never felt romantically inclined nor sexually to anyone or really anything, so these feelings didn't feel like love to me. But maybe it was just delusion that pushed my next move. I would always watch him when I had lunch. I got in line just like normal, but I always knew where he would sit. He never changed spots and I stood behind him, still and unmoving. It really felt amazing to be near this person for no good reason. Over time, it was more than just staring at him. I followed him in the halls of our school and I knew his entire schedule. I knew his full name, age, birthday, his house, and his family. I didn't think it was weird. I just wanted to know more about him and to be with him in a way that I couldn't really describe. I told myself it wasn't love, because why would I love a person I've never spoken to or really even know? It got to the point that I always thought about him. When I got home, I'd go through the pictures I took of him from school that day. I was almost excited. What if he caught me? Would he tell me to never speak to him again or go near him? Would he think it was nice and speak to me how I want? What would happen? I didn't even care what happened. It wouldn't change how I felt. Nothing did. I got bold. One day he had to walk home, so I followed him to the nearby wooded area. He was a pretty fit guy, so he was quicker than I was, and I did get tired of walking so far, but I was determined to follow. I didn't want to follow him home since I already knew where he lived, and I wasn't going to go that far. He almost saw me many times, as the path he was taking was normal for him, but not for me. It was rocky with dead leaves all over. I tried to be quiet to not let him notice me. Eventually, I left, satisfied with new pictures of him walking to add to my delusion and to my growing collection. I regret every bit of this. I didn't study for school like I normally would, so I'd sometimes talk to the teachers and they would tell me how I needed to get higher grades to pass the class. So I tried to get back into the flow of doing work more often. When I was moved to a different biology class, I saw him there in the back. I was sitting right next to him with a reasonable gap between us. I felt so happy that I would finally get the chance to speak to him without worry or anxiety or people listening in. During that class, he would sometimes look my way, at me, but I didn't think too much of it at first. Maybe he was just doing it to look near me at someone else, but it kept happening, so I would do the same. We would stare at each other. It felt so, I don't even know how to describe it. Eventually, I tried to talk to him and ask for help with some notes. I never really spoke to anyone, so this was new to me. I only spoke to teachers and sometimes, if I had to, other students. He was nice, and he would speak to me in a tone that I was unfamiliar with. It was pleasant. It didn't last too long, as I realized that he had found a poem that I'd written to him that I was not going to give him. He took the paper from my desk, and I just stood there next to him, honestly more worried than I thought I'd be. He didn't say anything. He just sat down and we didn't speak during that period. I I left and went online to find his socials. I apologized to him and I said I understood if he didn't want to speak to me. He said that he knew that I liked him, which shocked me. But to be honest, it was obvious to everyone but myself. He never knew that I followed him or took pictures of him. At least, I don't think so. I later found out that he was not supportive of me liking him, as he was a straight male and I was not his usual romantic interest. Over time, I did stop following him, and I never spoke to him after that, but he would still stare at me very often. I don't know why. I had done this with one other person, the same game of following and taking pictures, but this other guy was cut short as I moved away. I honestly don't know what compelled me to do these things. I hope I don't do them again. I now live happier than when I was in these situations, so I hope things can sort themselves out for me mentally. The story may not sound so bad, but I left out details on purpose due to them being private and somewhat disturbing. This might not be one of the freakiest stories of all time, but it's a great reminder that you should never fully relax in a taxi. In the place where I live, the taxi service is pretty well developed. We have a global app where you have an ID as a passenger and the driver has one too. There's a rating system so you know what to expect, and people get punished for doing bad things. You feel pretty safe with that system. It's not like the old days of completely random taxis. I've never had any serious trouble with drivers, until yesterday. I needed to travel from one small town to another passing through a big city. Everything felt off from the very start. The taxi was showing up weirdly on the app's map, but I thought, oh well, that happens. The internet and GPS can be glitchy sometimes. Eventually, the driver arrived and we started the trip. Right away, something just felt wrong. The driver didn't mark that the drive had started in the app. I didn't even see the awaiting status, which drivers sometimes use to get extra cash for waiting. I usually tolerate that, but this was just strange. We were also taking an unusual route, not the one I'm used to. I even had a weird thought. What if he starts heading in the wrong direction? Not toward the city center, but out to the suburban area instead. And damn, he did. He had been pretty silent since the beginning of the trip, and it became very clear that this was not an accident. He still hadn't started the ride in the app, and we were literally driving in the opposite direction, one that had no chance of leading to my destination. At that moment, I genuinely felt scared. It's a horrible feeling when something like this happens and you're alone. I'm a 27-year-old female, by the way, and I'm in a car with a stranger. I gathered myself and asked, "Hey, excuse me, what path did you choose? I don't need to go that way." Immediately, he changed direction toward the correct route, started the trip in the app, and looked absolutely furious. And keep in mind, the trip was about an hour long. He continued driving, but still not exactly as the navigator suggested. He stayed on the correct general route, but kept making odd choices, especially as we got closer to the end of the trip. At that point, I'd called a friend and casually said that I was almost there, just in case, so someone would know I was expected and on my way. He remained silent the entire time. When I finally got out of the car, I was literally shaking. I understand that it's likely that he wasn't planning the worst-case scenario we're all thinking of, but his actions were absolutely not okay. What if I didn't have the app working? What if I hadn't checked the road? What if I didn't know the route at all? The most chill explanation is that he wanted to take the longest route possible to get more money, maybe an extra hour of driving. But that's ridiculous, and even then not acceptable. I wrote to customer support and reported the situation. Hopefully I just don't get him as a driver again. So, my story happened a few years ago when I was 10 or 11. At that time, my mom and dad had just divorced and my mom moved into a small apartment. The building had 2 apartments per floor right across from each other. In the first few months, we never really saw the neighbor who lived in front of us. But suddenly, we started seeing him more often. I remember the first time I saw him. It was behind the building in the small garden. He was there with his dogs, and I don't know if I felt scared. Not just scared in a usual way, but this feeling like something was wrong. It was like he was staring at me, but not in a normal way. I couldn't explain it, but it made me feel uneasy. There was just something about him, his presence, that felt strange, even though I couldn't pinpoint what exactly it was. It just felt wrong. A few days later, he came to our apartment and he asked my mom if he could buy me toys and even underwear. My mom was naturally scared. I don't know what happened next, but I just know that she kicked him out of our apartment right away. Then about 2 weeks later, it was around midnight. My room was right next to the front door, and I suddenly started hearing knocking. But it wasn't just regular knocking. It was like someone was trying to force the door open by jiggling the handle. It started slow at first, but then it got faster and faster. I could hear it and my heart started racing. I was frozen in fear. I tried to get up to wake my mom or even look through the peephole, but I couldn't move. I was so scared that my body just wouldn't cooperate. I know that it wasn't a dream or anything. I knew it was real. I could feel the panic in my chest. After that, my mom and I moved out quickly, and we never saw him again. But since then, I've really developed this weird paranoia that never really goes away. It feels like my brain keeps playing tricks on me. I hear a little noise and suddenly I'm convinced someone's in the house. I keep imagining things that aren't there, like someone hiding in the hallway, watching me from the dark. I know it sounds irrational, but it doesn't feel that way at the moment. It's like my body freezes, my heart races, and I can't move, just like that night. And it comes in waves. Some days I'm totally fine, and others it all comes back stronger than ever. I start thinking someone might come back, that someone might already be inside. Even when I lock the doors, double check everything, I can't fully shake that feeling. It's exhausting, and I hate that it still has this power over me. It's honestly really not fun. I feel ridiculous sometimes, but it happens out of nowhere, and I just can't stop the fear. It's completely irrational, but it's there, and sometimes it feels like I just can't escape it. And a few years later, someone actually broke into our house. It was a guy who was drunk or high, and I don't think he even had bad intentions. He was just lost, but that didn't make it any less scary. The paranoia is still there, even though I try to remind myself that it's just my brain playing tricks on me. Anyway, that's my story. I know it's not the scariest one, and it probably won't be as interesting to others, and it's my first one, but I just needed to share it. I don't know how to get over it. If anyone has had similar experiences or feelings, I'd be happy to talk about it. Thanks. My name is Keith. I'm 19 years old and I've lived my whole life in a quiet little town. We've only got about 800 people here, and not much ever really changes. Folks live slow here, real slow. You get up early, go to work, maybe stop by the diner for lunch, then sit on the porch in the evening and talk about the weather. People say nothing ever happens here, but that's not really true. Some things have happened, strange things. There's one part of our town that everyone avoids, a place that we all know about but don't talk about much. We just call it the Hill. No one gives it a fancy name. It's just the Hill. Simple, dangerous, off limits. When we were kids, our parents always told us to never go near it. Stay away from the Hill, they'd say. Don't play there. Don't even look at it too long. But no one ever told us why. They'd just get quiet whenever we asked or changed the subject. That made it worse, honestly. It made us curious. There were rumors, of course. You know how kids love to tell stories. Some said a cult lived out there. Others said people went missing near it. But they were just whispers. Nothing we could prove. I always figured it was just a scary story to keep us from wandering off. But then one night, Joe dared me to go. Joe's 2 years older than me. He's 21 now. He's always been like a big brother. Brave, tough, maybe a little stupid sometimes, but he's the kind of guy you want on your side. We've been best friends since we were in diapers. When I was 10 and Joe was 12, we were sleeping over at his house one summer night. It was hot and we couldn't sleep. We were talking about ghosts and monsters like kids do, and somehow we'd started talking about the hill. You know, I bet that cult stuff ain't even real, Joe said, staring up at the ceiling. I shrugged. I don't know, maybe not. He then turned to me and grinned. Want to go find out? I froze. I wanted to say no, but I didn't. I couldn't. I didn't want him thinking I was scared, even if I was. We grabbed a couple of flashlights and slipped out the back door just after midnight. The streets were empty, just the sound of bugs in our shoes crunching on the gravel. The air felt thick, like a storm was coming. We reached the hill after about 10 minutes. It looked bigger at night. The grass moved like waves in the dark, and the moon made everything feel colder than it should have been. We climbed slowly, keeping our lights low. At the top, we had dug down and peeked over the edge. That's when we saw them. About 20 people were standing in a circle near the base of the hill, under the big oak tree that had been there forever. They wore long black robes and white masks, plain blank masks with no features. Each of them held a candle, and they were chanting something we couldn't understand. The sound didn't even feel like words. It felt like buzzing in your bones. I wanted to run right then, but I couldn't move. Then Joe slipped. His foot caught a loose rock, and it tumbled down the hill with a loud crack. The chanting stopped. Every head turned toward us. We didn't wait. We took off running, tearing through the grass down the far side of the hill and across the tracks. I swear I heard someone chasing us, but I never looked back. We didn't stop until we were behind Joe's house again, hearts pounding, lungs burning. We collapsed in the backyard and didn't say a word for a long time. After that, we never really talked about what we saw. We just moved on. Sort of. But every time I walked past that hill, I felt eyes on me. Years passed. We finished school and started working. Our small little town stayed the same. Quiet on the outside. But that feeling, the one that you get when something isn't right, it never left us. Then a few months ago, Joe came to me with a strange look on his face. Have you ever thought about going back? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Part of me had been thinking about it too. The other part wanted to forget it forever. We're older now, he said. We can handle it. Might even find out what's really going on. I should have said no, but I didn't. So we went. This time we brought better flashlights, pocket knives just in case, and our phones. It was around 1 a.m. when we reached the hill again. The grass was still tall. The wind was still quiet. Everything looked the same, but it felt worse somehow. We climbed to the top and looked over. Nothing. No circle this time. No candles. No chanting. We started to relax. Maybe it really had just been a weird memory from when we were kids. Then Joe tapped my shoulder and pointed. There was something under the tree. We crept down slowly, trying to not make a sound. When we got close enough, I saw what it was. A circle of rocks, fresh like someone had just made it. And right in the middle was a small wooden box. Joe bent down and opened it. Inside were 5 white masks, old but clean, untouched by time or weather. Suddenly, we both felt it. We weren't alone. The air shifted. Cold swept in. I looked around and saw shadows, figures standing just beyond the trees, watching. We dropped the box and ran. That night, we didn't go back to our homes. We drove 2 towns over and slept in Joe's truck at a gas station. We never told anyone. Not our parents, not our friends, no one. But we both agreed on something. We'd never go back to the hill again. And when we have kids of our own, we'll tell them the same things that our parents told us. Stay away from the hill. Don't go near it. Don't even think about it. Because now we know why. And some things are just better left alone. My name is Anna and I'm 21 years old. I've lived in the same small town my whole life. It's not a place you'll ever see on the news or find on a map unless you're really looking, but it's home. Everyone knows everyone, and you can't walk down Main Street without someone waving or asking how your family is doing. It's quiet here. Nothing big really happens. No one even locks their doors during the day. People leave their keys in the ignition while they run into the store. It's the kind of place where you feel safe. At least most of it is. There is one part of town though that we all avoid. It's on the west side, past the old train yard and behind the factories that shut down years ago. People don't go there unless they have to. Most of the houses are falling apart. Some are abandoned. The rest are barely holding on. It's where a lot of the homeless people and addicts end up. There's a gas station over there, but no one from my side of town stops at it, especially not after dark. My parents always warned me about that area. Don't drive through there. Don't stop. Don't even roll down your window, my dad would say. I always listened, until one night when I didn't really have a choice. It was late, around 10:30 p.m., and I had just finished a long shift at the diner. I was more tired than usual. My feet hurt, my back was sore, and I was counting down the minutes until I could get home and collapse into the bed. I walked out to my car and locked the door and noticed something that made my stomach drop. The gas light was on. I hadn't even realized how low it was. I'd been meaning to fill up for days, but just kept putting it off. I figured I could make it to the station near my apartment, but halfway across town, my car gave a little jerk. The needle dropped all the way to the E. I knew I wouldn't make it. The only gas station close enough was the one on the west side, the one that I'd always avoided. I tried to think of another way, maybe someone I could call, but my phone battery was dead. Of course it was. I was alone, out of gas, and out of options. I sighed, turned down the old industrial road, headed towards the one place that I never wanted to go. The gas station was mostly empty. A few of the overhead lights flickered, casting weird shadows across the lot. The building looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. The windows were stained, and one of the pumps had a trash bag taped over it. There was only one other car there, a rusted old sedan with one headlight missing and a busted front bumper. I pulled up to the farthest pump, trying to stay close to the light. I told myself that it would only take a minute, just enough gas to get home. I got out and swiped my card. The screen was cracked, but it worked. As I started pumping, I kept glancing around. The silence felt heavy. I tried to keep calm and told myself I'd be out of there in no time at all. That's when I saw him. He came from around the corner of the building. Tall, thin, with messy hair, and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His eyes were wide, darting around like he was looking for something, or someone. He walked straight toward me. "Hey there," he said, smiling in a way that didn't really feel friendly. "Got a few bucks?" I gave a quick shake of my head. "Sorry, I don't have anything," I said. He didn't stop. He kept coming closer. You sure?" he asked again. "I just need a couple of dollars, that's all. I'm having a rough night." I could feel my heart start to race. I tried to stay calm. I didn't want to make a scene. I forced a small smile. "I don't really have any cash," I said. "I'm just getting gas and heading home." But then he stepped closer again. Too close. "You live around here?" he asked, tilting his head. "You look familiar." My hands started to shake at this point. I could feel the gas pump still running, but I didn't care anymore. In the middle of pumping gas, I stopped and put the pump back in the holder. "I need to go," I said quickly. Before he could say anything else, I turned, got into my car, and slammed the door shut. I hit the lock button just as he reached it and knocked on the window. "Hey," he said, louder this time. "Don't be rude. I just wanted to talk." I didn't look at him. I started the engine, backed up fast, and drove out of the lot like something was chasing me. My heart didn't slow down until I pulled into my apartment complex on the other side of town. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing that same knock on my window in my head. I kept seeing his eyes, the way he smiled at me, like he already knew me somehow. It made my skin crawl. For weeks after that, I didn't go anywhere at night without feeling nervous. Every time I saw someone walking down the street, I'd tense up. I started double-checking my doors at night. I even bought pepper spray to keep in my bag. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't want them to worry. But I think they noticed the change. I wasn't as relaxed as I used to be. That one night really stuck with me. Eventually, the fear faded, a little at a time. Life went on, but I never forgot how it felt. I've always loved my town. It's a good place, but I've learned that even good places have dark corners, places people don't talk about, places that feel like something right out of a bad dream. And sometimes all it takes is one bad night to remind you that safety can be a fragile thing. I'll never go back to that gas station again, no matter how low my tank gets. Hi everyone, my name is Richard. I'm 60 years old now, living in a Manhattan apartment that overlooks the park. It's not the biggest place in the city, but it's mine and it's comfortable. I've made a good life for myself here. A career in finance, some wise investments, and enough luck to retire early. I keep busy with charity boards, museum visits, and way too many cups of coffee from the shop down the street. People here know me by name. They see me in my tailored coats and polished shoes and assume that I've always been this version of myself. Collected, successful, and at ease. But sometimes, especially on quiet nights, I think about who I used to be. A boy named Richie from a town in Georgia you've never even heard of. A town where the crickets screamed louder than the passing trains, and everybody knew the make and model of your family's car. I really loved that town once, but I also feared it. There's one memory that's never really left me, no matter how many years and city lights I've put between myself and that backwoods road. It happened in the summer of 1975. I was 10 years old. Back then, we lived on the edge of our little town, a population of maybe 2,000 if you counted the cows. My father worked at the lumber mill, and my mother stayed home. I spent most of my time riding my bike, exploring dirt roads, and pretending I was a stuntman or a cowboy or something much bigger than what I was. That particular day had been ordinary. I rode over to my friend Tommy's house after breakfast. We played in his backyard, traded baseball cards, and argued over whether Superman could beat Spider-Man in a fight. It was still light out when I started to ride back home. Late afternoon, maybe a little past 5. The air was hot and sticky. The sun was beginning to dip, throwing long shadows across the fields. The ride home was about 2 miles. Most of it was a quiet road. Trees on one side, barbed wire fences on the other. I didn't mind the quiet. I liked it. But that day, something was different. I first noticed the truck about halfway home. It was an old model, maybe a Ford or a Dodge, matte gray with rust patches. I heard it behind me before I saw it. A low growl of an engine that wasn't in any hurry. I glanced back and I saw it cresting a hill behind me just far enough away to not think much of it. But it didn't pass me. Instead, it stayed behind, not close but steady, always just a little too far back to see who was driving. I slowed down a bit, thinking maybe they wanted to pass. The truck slowed down too. That's when I knew something was wrong. I sped up, pushing my little legs harder on the pedals. The tires rattled on the gravel, and my backpack bounced against my spine. The truck picked up speed too, matching me again. Not fast, not aggressive, just following. There was a spot up ahead where the trees got thicker, a patch of woods I sometimes cut through when I wanted to take the long way home. That day, I didn't plan to, but when I saw those trees, I didn't think. I just turned. My tires slid on the loose gravel, but I caught myself and darted off the road. The path into the woods was narrow, barely wide enough for a bike, full of roots and fallen branches. Behind me, the truck came to a slow stop. It didn't turn off the road. It just sat there. I didn't look back again. I dropped the bike as soon as I was far enough in. The brush was too thick to ride through, and I didn't want the sound of the tires giving me away. I ran deeper into the woods, my breath burning in my chest, my legs getting scratched by twigs and thorns. I didn't stop until I found a fallen tree and slid underneath it, pressing myself into the cool dirt. Then I just waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. It got darker, the trees casting shadows that seemed to move even when the wind didn't. I kept listening for the truck, for footsteps, anything. At one point, I had heard the leaves crunching nearby. I held my breath for so long that it actually hurt, but nothing came. Eventually, the forest went quiet again. The cicadas hummed like always. The fear stayed with me, but I knew that I couldn't hide there forever. It was nearly nightfall when I finally crept back out, still crouched low, scanning the road through the trees. The truck was gone. My bike was where I left it, at first. But when I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't. The spot was empty. Just flattened grass where it had fallen. No sign of the tires, no broken pieces. Just gone. I just stood there for a while, frozen. Part of me wanted to call out, but I didn't really know who would answer. I started walking home. The road home felt longer than it ever had before. Every rustle in the woods made my heart jump. Every shadow looked like something watching. I didn't run though. I just kept walking. When I finally made it to our porch, my mother was outside calling my name. She ran to me, eyes wide, hugged me like I'd been missing for days. I didn't tell her what happened. Not all of it. I just said I got lost and walked home. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared out the window waiting to see that truck again, but I never did. The next day, I went back. I told my parents that I was going to Tommy's again, but I didn't. I walked the same road, heart pounding the whole way. I searched the woods thinking maybe I'd missed the bike. Maybe I'd panicked and just forgot where I dropped it. But it was gone. Completely. I never saw that bike again. My parents ended up buying me another one later that year, but I never rode that route again. I never even wanted to, and I never even told anyone the full story. Not even my best friend Tommy. Life went on after that. I grew up and left that town after high school, and I never looked back. I moved north, went to college, got a job, and built a career. Now I live in New York City where the streets never sleep and there are way too many people to notice you're afraid of the dark. But I never forgot that night, that truck, that silence. Sometimes I wonder who was driving it, why they didn't try harder to catch me, what they wanted, what they were thinking when they took my bike. Maybe it was just a bored local trying to scare a kid. Maybe it was something worse. I'll never know. I was 23 years old when this happened. I once met up with an old friend of mine, male 22 years old, a friend that I had known for a few years prior to the meetup in November 2017. I had actually met this person on a dating site. However, as time went on, the relationship between us became strictly platonic. There were no red flags. My gut did not warn me, so I completely trusted this person. We met up in town behind a bus station on a grassy hill surrounded by trees and a tall wall. Our meeting was to just have a smoke, get a little high, and to have a small catch-up. The meet was fine. I actually started smoking weed a few months before, so I was still relatively new to it. He had brought something new for me to try, purple haze. I wasn't at all anxious about trying it, as I completely trusted this person and would never believe that he would lie to me. He had packed a full blunt for me, but I only managed to smoke a quarter of the blunt. We spoke during this time about work, our previous relationships, and random stuff. About half an hour later, I had started to feel extremely lightheaded and anxious. I suddenly had this strange feeling where I did not feel comfortable at all, and I really wanted to go home. When I asked him if I could go home, he had offered to take me home, but I just said, "No, it's okay." He offered again, "Please let me take you home. You'll be safe with me. I won't hurt you." I shook my head and said, "No thank you. I can take myself home." When I started to walk away, I felt like I was walking on a cloud. My head became dizzy and my eyesight was a little blurry. I had never felt like this before, and in time, I started to panic. When we made our way down the hill toward the bus station, I was relieved, as there were a lot of people around, so if anything happened, someone would step in. I became extremely terrified of him. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that told me to stay away from him, and when I got to the bus station, I told him I would call my taxi here and go home. His tone was no longer nice, but very stern. "I'm gonna take you home now," and he began to pull at my jacket. I told him no, and I was going home on my own. He pulled my jacket harder, and I fell against him. He pulled me into him and told me that I didn't need to be scared of him, but I was so terrified. At this point, I had started to feel very paranoid, and I couldn't see properly. I pushed him away from me and rubbed my eyes and called for a taxi. He tried to pull my phone from me and yelled in my face, "Do you ever listen? I'm taking you home." I noticed a few people had stopped and asked if I was okay. All I remember was that I wanted to go home. So a lady kindly called a taxi for me and waited with me, made sure I was okay and helped me into the taxi. During the time when I waited for the taxi, he kept trying to get me to come to his car with him, but the lady that looked after me told him to go home and that she was going to take me home instead. So he left. When I got home, I gave the taxi driver some money and told him to keep the change. I didn't want to wait around. I just wanted to get to my bed because at that time it was the only place I would feel safe from harm. That evening, I laid in my bed for 5 hours straight staring at the ceiling. I don't remember if I thought about anything or if my mom came in at any time. I just remember lying in bed doing nothing until the paranoia and sickly feeling began to wear off. I remember looking at my phone and seeing that I had 32 missed calls from him, 10 voicemails left, and 50 plus messages. The messages were weird. He had sent about 20 messages just asking where I was and when I got home, and in one of the voicemails, he had told me that he had this fantasy of taking me home while drugged up and tying me up. He wanted to blindfold me, and he wanted me to submit myself to him. I freaked out and blocked him on all social media, Instagram, Snapchat, Discord, and I blocked his number too. Before the blocking, I told him if he ever contacted me again, then I would call the police. I heard nothing from him for about a month, until I received a text from an unknown number asking me how I was. I hadn't given my number to anyone, so I ignored it. I then received another message a few minutes later saying they missed me and they would see me soon. I asked who they were. No reply. Nothing. I've spoken to some friends with regards to my story, and all of them explained that weed would never make anyone feel this way, and a lot of them think I was given spice, not weed. Spice looks a lot like weed, but the effects are a lot stronger and more dangerous. The story happened just last week, and it's still fresh in my mind. My family and I had decided to stop at Culver's for lunch. It was around noon when we pulled into the parking lot of a newer Culver's in our town. We parked and got out of the car and began walking into the restaurant. As we're walking in, I notice a strange guy sitting in a black Chevy pickup with the driver's door open. He looked to be in his 30s and he was smoking a cigarette and seemingly watching everything and everyone around him very carefully. I didn't think much of it since our town has a lot of weirdos in it, and we just went inside. We were sitting at a table near the window, and I could see the guy's trunk a few feet spaced away, and he was still sitting there smoking a cigarette. I thought it was weird he wasn't getting any food or anything, but I figured maybe he was waiting for a DoorDash order or something. It took a while to get our food, but eventually we got it. We had been there so long at this point that the employees were doing shift change. All of a sudden, I hear 3 loud pops and look out the window to see a female employee drop to the ground, blood getting all over the concrete, and the man closing the door on his truck and peeling out of the parking lot. My parents and I were in shock, and everything was just a blur after that. But basically the police showed up and shut down the restaurant and we had to leave. Later on the news, we learned that the man was the woman's ex-boyfriend who she had just broken up with, and he had decided to end her life because of it and waited for her outside of her work. And little did she know at the end of her shift she'd be walking right into her fate. The man was arrested and charged with murder, public endangerment, and discharging a firearm in a public space, and he was given 190 years in prison. The image of that woman laying in a pool of blood is still burned into my mind forever, and I'm never going back to that Culver's again. My name is Stephanie, and this all happened when I was 17 years old a few years ago. I got my first job the summer before my senior year in June of 2022. Burger King wasn't exactly my dream, but it paid better than babysitting and didn't involve cleaning strangers' houses like my mom's job. I wanted to help her out with the bills and save up for a beat-up Honda Civic that I saw parked at a neighbor's house with a for sale sign in the window. It was $2,000. I figured I could make that by the fall if I picked up enough hours. I was hired 2 days after I filled out the online application. My uniform was a little too big, and the visor made me look like a dork, but I didn't care. There was something exciting about clocking in, putting on a headset, and pretending that I was part of something real. I made burgers, bagged fries, and restocked napkins. I learned to refill the soda machine without making a mess. I liked the buzz of the drive-thru during dinner rush and the way that my manager Tanya called me kiddo when I got things right. For a little while, things felt normal. Then he started coming in. The first time I noticed him was on a Tuesday night. I remember because my feet were killing me and I was counting down the minutes until close. He came in just after the dinner rush around 6:45 p.m. He looked out of place, older than most of our customers. Maybe late 40s, with graying hair and skin that looked like it hadn't seen a moisturizer in a decade. His eyes didn't move the way most people's did. They stayed fixed on me for way too long. He walked up to my register, ordered a Whopper with cheese and a medium fry. When I asked if he wanted a drink, he didn't answer me right away. Instead, he smiled in this way that made my stomach just twist. "You're new here," he said. "Yep, it's my first month." "You've got a nice face," he said. "I bet you hear that a lot." I didn't know what to say. I just handed him his receipt and told him that his food would be right out. He sat down at the table closest to the counter, eating slowly, watching me between bites. I told Tanya all about it after my shift. "Oh, he's just lonely," she said with a sigh. "We get a lot of regulars like that. Don't let it bother you." I wanted to believe her, but then he came in again the very next night, and the night after that too, every single night. Always during my shift, always my line. He never changed his order. A Whopper with cheese, medium fry, and no drink. But he'd started adding little comments every time. "Love that braid you're wearing tonight. You look tired, sweetheart. Long day? I could take you somewhere nice if you ever wanted a break from this place." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he looked at me, like he was measuring something. I tried to keep it professional, short responses, eyes on the register, but it started to get harder to smile. Even when I wasn't working the counter, I'd feel a stare from across the dining room. I started dreading my shifts. One of my coworkers, Eli, noticed something was off too. "You good?" he asked me one night while restocking the sauce packets. "That guy gives me bad vibes." I nodded. "He's been here every night, always talking to me." "Well, did you tell Tanya?" Eli asked. "She thinks he's harmless." Eli frowned. "I don't like it." Neither did I, but I didn't want to make drama over a creepy customer. I mean, what if I really was just overreacting? Then came the night everything changed. It was a Thursday night just after 11 p.m. Tanya was finishing the register count, and I was taking out the trash before clocking out. I remember checking my phone. 11:22 p.m., and I had texted my mom that I'd be home soon. I walked out the back door into the alley behind the building, headed toward the parking lot. It was quiet. Too quiet. That's when I saw him. He was leaning against the wall near the edge of the dumpster, half in shadow, smoking a cigarette. "Hey there," he said. I froze. I hadn't seen him in the restaurant that night. "I thought you'd come out sooner," he added. "I waited here for a while." My heart dropped into my stomach. "What do you want?" He took a step forward, flicking the cigarette away. "I just wanted to talk. You're always so busy inside." I tried to move past him, but he had stepped in front of me. "Look, I like you, okay? I think we'd get along. You seem smart, kind. I could take you out sometime. Maybe show you something better than this greasy place." "No," I said, my voice trembling. "You need to leave." "I'm not trying to scare you," he said quickly. "Tanya!" I screamed. The back door slammed open. Tanya appeared in her work polo, eyes scanning the alley. "Steph? What's going on out here?" The man's eyes went wide. He bolted, running into the darkness behind the building before Tanya could catch more than a glimpse of his outline. I couldn't stop shaking. Tanya walked me to my car and stayed with me until I calmed down enough to drive. We called the police, filed a report, even showed them security footage, but nothing ever came of it. He never came back after that though. I think he got scared. But sometimes when I'm alone in a parking lot or walking home after dark, I wonder if he just found someone else, someone who didn't scream in time. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Whether you're working fast food, retail, or anywhere that puts you in contact with strangers, trust your instincts. Creeps don't always look like villains. They don't always break laws. Sometimes they wait, they watch, they wear you down until they think they can cross the line. It doesn't matter if they're a customer. It doesn't matter if no one else believes you. You don't owe anyone your silence, your smile, or your time. Speak up, make noise, ask for help, because the truth is danger doesn't always kick the door down. Sometimes it walks in, orders a burger, and stares at you from across the counter, and you have every right to walk away, every right to be safe, and every right to say no. I never really had to work, not in the way most people do anyway. I come from a pretty well-off family, the kind where birthdays meant weekend trips instead of presents. And if I ever needed money for books or clothes or rent, my parents would just Venmo it over before I even finished asking. And I don't say that to brag. Honestly, it's always made me feel weird, like I was watching life from behind glass while everyone else was out there living it. So at 20, halfway through college and smack in the middle of a pretty cushy existence, I decided to do something completely out of character. I got a job at Taco Bell. It wasn't for the money. God knows I didn't need the $10 something an hour they were offering. I think I just wanted to feel something different, something normal, something real. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I wanted to prove that I wasn't as soft as I secretly worried I was. Whatever the reason, I filled out the application during a break between classes, and I didn't think twice about it. And to my surprise, I got hired. No interview, no questions beyond. Can you work weekends? Just like that. I had a purple visor and my name written in Sharpie on a piece of masking tape. It was my first job ever. The rush. The first few shifts were almost fun. There's a rhythm to fast food. The strange choreography of beeping fryers, shouted orders, hands moving fast but knowing exactly what they're doing. My coworkers were a mixed bunch. College kids like me, single moms, one guy out on parole who made the best burritos I've ever seen. They were all kind, sharp in unexpected ways, and weirdly funny. They didn't treat me any differently, even though I knew I stuck out. My hands were soft. I flinched at grease pops. I said please and thank you way too much, but no one ever said anything. They just showed me how to do things, how to reset the register whenever it froze, how to fold a crunch wrap without it falling apart, how to keep your cool when someone threw a drink at the drive-thru window because we were out of Baja Blast. And I would say that I did okay, better than I thought I would. I started to look forward to the shifts, especially at night, when the store got quiet and we were all just killing time until close, laughing over broken headset mics or sneaking extra cinnamon twists. It felt like I was part of something. Then, that night happened, and everything changed. The truck. It was a Friday. One of those strange in-between nights where the rush dies early but the store stays open late. 11:03 p.m. I remember because I had just checked the wall clock wondering how much longer I had to stay. We were on cleanup duty. I was in the back stacking up the trash bags for the usual trip out to the dumpster. That's when I noticed the truck. An old white pickup beat to hell, rust eating the lower panels, duct tape over one of the taillights. It had been parked there for a while, near the very back of the lot, right at the edge where the lights didn't quite reach. I thought it was weird, but it is a Taco Bell. Weird as standard. Maybe it belonged to a customer from earlier who left it overnight. Maybe someone was sleeping in it. We got that sometimes. People who just needed a place to rest, scroll on their phones, or leech off the free Wi-Fi. Still though, something about this truck, it unsettled me. It was too still, like it had been waiting. I shook it off. I tied up the bags, grabbed two, one in each hand, pushed open the back door into the night. Outside it was quiet. No stars, just low clouds smothering the sky. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly. The wind carried the faint smell of fries, bleach, and wet asphalt. The truck sat maybe 20 feet away, half in shadow. I didn't look at it. Well, not really. I kept my eyes forward, focused on the dumpster. Then I opened the lid. The finger. I threw the first bag in, and it landed with a wet smack. The second bag snagged onto something. Maybe a box, maybe metal, so I leaned in to shift it. That's when I saw it. Near the corner, half hidden by a flattened soda box, there was a finger. At first, of course, I thought it was a prank. A fake Halloween prop someone tossed in for a laugh. But then I saw the dirt under the chipped nail, the dried blood crusted on the knuckle, the pale soft look of the real skin. It was real. I froze. Everything in me just stopped. My stomach dropped and I couldn't hear my own breath. Too loud, too fast. I couldn't think. I couldn't even feel anything. I was just staring at it. Then I turned and ran, bursting through the door, shouting for my manager and tripping over a mop bucket. At first she laughed, thought I was messing with her. I then insisted, borderline hysterical. She came with me reluctantly. The moment she saw it, her whole face changed, like someone turned out the lights behind her eyes. She didn't say anything, just backed away, locked the door, and called 911. The aftermath. The cops arrived pretty fast. Blue and red lights lit up the parking lot, bouncing off the wet pavement. They roped off the back area with yellow tape. Flashlights scanned the dumpster, the truck, which by then was gone, vanished. I hadn't heard it leave. None of us had. I gave my statement. So did my manager. The rest of the crew stood in the back room, quiet and confused. No one had seen anything unusual. No one had even noticed the truck arrive or drive away. It was like it had been there just long enough. Days passed. Eventually, we heard back. The finger had belonged to a missing woman. She was homeless. I'm not going to share her real identity just for anonymity's sake. She was in her early 40s. From what I heard, she at one point had a really great life. But like many, she went down the path of drugs. And I guess too many mistakes caught up to her. The rest of her was found dumped in a lake 40 miles north. No arrests, no suspects, nothing else. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The wait. I kept working there for a few more months, pretended everything was fine, smiled through orders, cracked jokes, stayed late when someone needed help. But I felt different, like a thin crack had formed somewhere deep inside of me, and no one else could see it. Every time I took out the trash, I felt like someone was watching, like the shadows were holding their breath. I started dreaming about it. Not the finger exactly, but the dumpster. Always the dumpster. In the dreams, it was way deeper than it should be. Endless. Something waiting at the bottom, breathing. Eventually, I quit. Told everyone I needed to focus on school. Exams were coming up, but that really wasn't the truth. The truth is, I just couldn't stop thinking about that woman, about how close I'd come to something that I didn't understand, something I still don't. I wonder if I'd looked earlier, if I'd said something about the truck sooner, if anything would have changed. I'll never know. Here's what I learned. People say the world is small, that we're all connected, but I think what they mean is danger doesn't feel distant when it's real. It can be as close as a dumpster behind your work, as near as the shadows beyond a parking lot light. I never expected to find anything out there. Certainly not a piece of someone's life or their death. But I did, and now I carry it with me. I still think about her. I still wonder who did it, and I still wish I'd never had to see what I saw. I love a good Pizza Hut personal pan pizza, especially when it's piping hot straight out of the oven and the cheese is still trying to escape you when you take that first bite. Greasy, slightly too salty, and somehow exactly what my body craves at 9:30 in the morning. I know it's not technically breakfast, but it's my comfort food whenever I'm running late, undercaffeinated, and annoyed at life. I love them so much that when the drive-thru is packed and the line is winding around the building like it's Black Friday, I'll park and go inside, like a peasant. Like a noble, pizza-hungry peasant who has better things to do than sit in a line of idling cars for 20 minutes. Yesterday was one of those days. Already behind schedule for work, hungry, and trying not to let my mood spiral. I pull into the lot and notice the line of cars in the drive-thru, sigh audibly to no one, and decide to be brave and go inside. As I'm walking toward the door, this girl is just standing there, right in front of it, blocking it with her whole body. She's facing me, but still kind of pushing the door open like she's going to hold it for me from the inside. Except she doesn't move. She just stands there with this weird vacant look on her face like she's buffering. I do that awkward shuffle thing, squeeze through the sliver of space she's left me and say, "Thanks." No response. She just closes the door behind me and then walks over to one of the tables and sits down. Didn't even order anything. Didn't even look around. Just sat. Whatever. I figured she was just waiting for someone, or maybe just charging her phone. It was too early and I was too hungry to care. I placed my order, grabbed a cup for my drink, and stood around trying to look patient while my stomach made sad, hollow sounds. Eventually, I get my pizza. Thank you, melted cheese gods, and I head back outside. I'm already running 10 minutes late, so I walk fast. I'm maybe 10 feet from my car when I hear someone yelling behind me. "Ma'am! Ma'am!" I keep walking. I'm not in the mood. People yell random stuff all the time. For all I know, someone's trying to sell me magazine subscriptions or convince me to sign up for a gym. But then I catch movement out of the corner of my eye. Someone running, fast, and toward me. I turn my head and it's the same girl from before. She's got a suitcase now, and a big one at that. Roller wheels, extendable handles, sleek and expensive looking. She's also wearing a really nice coat and a travel backpack that probably costs more than my monthly car insurance. So, not exactly someone down on her luck. She's yelling, "Ignoring me is rude, ma'am. I know you can hear me." Okay, I'm officially unsettled at this point. I reach my car and get the driver's door open. I'm grateful now that I parked in that weird end spot with the concrete and decorative rocks to the left of me. No car beside me. No car in front or behind me. Just a little bubble of escape potential. She closes the distance and stops just short of my car door. "I need you to take me to the terminal," she says. Not, "Can you please take me?" Not, "Hey, I'm stuck, do you mind?" Nope. It's a demand like I'm her Uber driver and this is a scheduled pickup. She doesn't even look out of breath. I tell her, "I'm sorry, I can't. I'm already late for work." I motion vaguely down the road like work is just around the corner. It's not, but she doesn't need to know that. "The terminal is right there," I add, pointing in the direction of the transit center. "You can literally walk. It's a 5-minute walk tops." She ignores that completely. "You have to take me," she repeats like the logic of it is self-evident. Now I'm getting pissed. This isn't someone in trouble. This isn't a scared traveler looking for help. This is someone who's decided that I'm responsible for her and doesn't care whether I agree. "I'm not taking you anywhere," I say flatly. "I'm leaving." I sit down and close my door, and as I'm turning the key in the ignition, I see her grab the passenger door handle and start yanking on it. Hard. Then she starts pounding on the window with the palm of her hand. Thankfully, my Jeep is a beat-up early 2000s model with manual locks. There was no way that door would open. She tries again. Then she starts shouting again, louder this time. Something about me being a horrible person, about how she needs this ride and that I'm selfish. And then, just when I thought she might walk away, she drops her suitcase and runs to the back of my Jeep. She starts digging through her purse with one hand, slamming her fist against my rear window with the other, over and over. If you know old Jeeps, you know the rear glass isn't exactly bulletproof. At that point, I'm not just freaked out, I'm genuinely scared. I have no idea what she's reaching for in that purse. A knife? A key to slash my tires? A weapon? I don't wait to find out. I shift into four-wheel drive, spin the wheel, and gun it. My Jeep lurches over the concrete curb, tires gripping the rocks like they were made for it. I bounce my way out of the lot like a paranoid stunt driver in a bad action movie, pepperoni grease still on my fingers. In the mirror, I catch one last glimpse of her chasing me to the sidewalk, still screaming. And just like that, she was gone. So yeah, to the wild Pizza Hut lady. Hopefully I won't encounter her again. I do have some lingering thoughts though. Am I a bad person for not giving her a ride? Or was this one of those self-preservation tests? I've read way too many stories where good Samaritans end up in body bags. How did she even get to Pizza Hut? And I mean with a backpack and a suitcase? Someone must have dropped her off where she walked. Why not just keep walking to the terminal? She had a working phone. She was holding it when she first demanded the ride. What if I had given her a ride and there were people waiting at the terminal? What if this was some kind of setup? If she had just asked for money, she probably would have gotten a 20 from me. But she didn't ask. I still have way too many thoughts about this. I'm a 19-year-old female, and this happened to me about a month ago. It was a Thursday night, cool and quiet, and just the right kind of still that made everything feel slower than it was. I'd just gotten off a long shift at the diner, hair pulled into a messy bun and my sneakers coated in syrup and spilled soda. The kind of night where all you want is a hot shower and some silence. But I needed stuff. Face wash, tampons, dry shampoo, and I was out of popcorn, which felt like a crime in itself. Target was open until 10, and it was only 9:42 when I pulled into the half-empty parking lot. I parked under a flickering lamppost, something that I always try to do out of habit. Light equals safety, or so they say. As I grabbed my little red basket and walked inside, the automatic doors whooshed open and let out a quiet sigh, like they were just as tired as I was. The store felt peaceful, almost therapeutic, the kind of place where you would walk in for one thing and leave with 20. I meandered to the beauty section, enjoying the cool air, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and the oddly comforting scent of plastic and laundry detergent. That's when I noticed them. 3 men, mid to late 20s, maybe even early 30s. One wore a black hoodie, the second a backwards cap, the third had shaggy hair and this way too long stare. At first, I thought nothing of it. People exist, men shop, no big deal. But it wasn't the kind of glance that ends. They kept looking. I turned down the skincare aisle. After a minute or two, one of them rounded the corner. Hoodie guy. He stood a few feet away, pretending to look at body wash. I kept my cool and grabbed a random cleanser off the shelf. Then I walked to the feminine hygiene section. Cap guy appeared. He didn't say anything, just lingered. I moved again towards snacks. Shaggy hair followed. It felt like a game that I hadn't agreed to play. A sick, silent version of tag. I circled aisles, taking random turns. Once I stopped in a nearly empty section and just waited. 10 seconds later, 2 of them passed the end of the aisle like they were patrolling. My hands started to shake. I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to be that girl who assumes the worst. But I stopped walking, and so did they. And when I doubled back, they did too. That's when I realized something. They weren't shopping. They were watching me. I clutched my basket tighter and walked briskly, but not running, to the front of the store. I found the customer service desk where a young guy in a red shirt and khakis stood restocking a shelf of returns. His name tag said Jeremy. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I think I'm being followed." He froze and then looked me in the eyes. I must have really looked terrified because he didn't question me. Just said, "Stay right there." He spoke into a walkie-talkie clipped to his belt, murmuring something about code yellow, then turned back to me. "You're okay. You're not alone. We'll walk you out." He called another employee over, an older woman named Carla who had the no-nonsense energy of someone who's seen everything. Together, they walked with me toward the exit, flanking me on both sides. I glanced behind us. The men were at the other end of the store now, standing together, watching. I couldn't hear their voices, but I could feel their eyes burning right into me. No purchases in hand, no cards, just standing, waiting. Once we reached the sliding doors, I told Jeremy which car was mine. He insisted on walking all the way with me, scanning the lot like a hawk. I thanked him maybe 3 times before I finally got to my car and slid inside, locking the doors instantly. He waited until I turned on the ignition and pulled away. I didn't cry until I made it to the stoplight at the edge of the plaza. My body had been on autopilot, hyper-aware, adrenaline-fueled. And now that I was finally out of there, it all just hit me at once. The truth is, nothing happened in the traditional sense. They didn't touch me. They didn't speak to me. But the threat was there, unspoken, looming, and that kind of fear stays with you. To every woman hearing this, please never let your guard down. Don't wait to make sure it's real. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Always park in your lights. Keep your head up. Watch for shadows. Trust your instincts even when the world tells you you're overreacting. We don't get the luxury of brushing off our fear. Not in this world. Speak up. Ask for help. You're not being dramatic. You're being smart. And maybe, just maybe, that awareness could save your life. Be safe. Watch your back. And never apologize for protecting yourself. My name is Kevin, and I was 25 years old when this happened. This was in 2019 before COVID, back when Walmart was still open 24/7, aka the best time to be at Walmart in my own opinion. Well anyways, I worked the graveyard shift at a Walmart in a small Florida town, one of the old school ones that stayed open 24/7. My hours were 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. 5 nights a week. I stocked shelves, unloaded pallets, cleaned up spills, and dodged weirdos who wandered in at 3 a.m. to buy one bandana or ask if we sold live bait. It wasn't a bad gig. Honestly, I kind of liked the stillness. No customers yelling. No kids crying in the toy aisle. Just fluorescent lights humming overhead. The occasional chatter from the overnight crew members, and the sounds of boxes being sliced open. That night, this was February I think, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before COVID hit the headlines for real, was no different. I had a cart of disinfectant sprays, Lysol wipes, and all that other cleaning stuff no one cared about at the time. I was in aisle 16 minding my business, zoning out, when I noticed someone standing at the far end, tall, slender, wearing a faded brown hoodie, hood up, torn jeans. Could have been any dude just killing time, but he wasn't moving, not browsing, not touching anything, just standing there, staring at the shelves like he was lost in thought, or worse, like he was waiting. I gave the usual line, "You find everything all right, man?" He turned towards me, and that's when I got the first hit of something off. His eyes looked blank, not tired, not high, just empty, like there was nothing behind them. He didn't say a word, just slowly shook his head no. One small movement, then he turned back toward the shelves. I let it go. You see weird people working nights. Rule of thumb, don't push. I moved a few aisles over to the cleaning tools. Mops, buckets, brooms, you get the point. 10 minutes in, I feel it again. That prickly sensation like I'm being watched. I look up. There he is again. This time he's at the opposite end of the aisle. Same posture. Hands in his hoodie pocket. Head tilted just slightly. Not close enough to be in my space, but definitely close enough to keep tabs on me. "Hey there, Need any help? I ask again, louder now. Another head shake. Nope, still no words. I'm starting to get annoyed now, but also uneasy. People who want trouble usually make a scene. This guy wasn't doing that. He was lingering, existing, but in a way that felt deliberate. I leave the aisle, push my car toward the back. I'm halfway to the break room when I glance behind me. He's not there. Good. Maybe he was just a quiet guy with poor social skills. But you know that feeling when your brain tells you something's off? That gut instinct? Mine just wouldn't shut up. A half hour passes. I'm back in aisle 5 now, working through a fresh cart of paper towels. I'm talking with Mike, another overnight guy, when I see the man yet again. This time he's not even pretending to shop. He's just standing by the end cap, facing sideways like he's listening. His eyes are on us. Mike notices too. You know that guy? He asked me under his breath. Nope, just keeps popping up though, I say. Mike doesn't say anything else. He just mutters, weird, and rolls his card away. I keep working. Time crawls. Every so often, I see that hoodie pop up across the store, never holding anything, never saying a word, just appearing. By 4 a.m., I'm so keyed up, I start skipping aisles, moving quicker, trying to stay unpredictable. It doesn't help. Eventually, he shows up again, like he's playing some kind of game with me. The only time that he almost interacted with me was when I took a detour through toys. I caught him watching me from the bike section, just standing behind a Spider-Man helmet on display. We locked eyes for maybe 3 seconds. My stomach dropped. Still nothing. No words. Just that long, frozen stare. At 6:30 a.m., daylight started to push through the tinted front doors. A few early shoppers then trickled in, mostly seniors, people grabbing prescriptions or getting a jump on groceries. The air felt a little safer with others around. By the time I clocked out at 7:04 a.m., I hadn't seen him in about 15 minutes. I figured that he must have finally left. I walked in my car alone, keys clenched between my fingers. It was a dumb habit that I had picked up from my sister, just in case, she always said. That morning, it didn't feel so dumb. The next day, I slept in. I got up around noon, threw on the news while eating leftover Chinese from the night before, and that's when I saw it. Local Walmart issues trespass order for Stalker. Man accused of targeting overnight employees. The image was grainy, pulled from a security camera, but it was him. Same hoodie, same expressionless stare. The report said that he had been visiting different Walmart locations in the county during the late hours. Never bought anything, just followed employees. Observed. At one store, he had apparently waited outside in the lot until an employee got off their shift. Didn't approach, just followed them halfway home in his car before peeling off. Cops said that he hadn't committed a crime yet, but Walmart banned him anyway. Said they were erring on the side of caution. Good. I didn't see him again after that. A few months later, the pandemic hit, and the world flipped upside down. Walmart stopped doing 24-hour shifts. Our crew broke apart. Some of us got laid off. I got a new job eventually, something in delivery, but I'll never forget that night. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. That tension, the questions, the gut instinct I almost talked myself out of listening to. People are strange. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Doesn't matter if it's day or night. If something feels off, trust it. We live in a world where danger doesn't always come in shouting. Sometimes it comes in silence, in stillness, in a stare that lasts way too long. Be careful no matter who you are. Be aware, stay sharp, because the truth is, some people are just wired wrong. Hey everyone, so the story I'm about to tell is actually still going on. Apologies in advance for how long this ended up being. It's just so crazy and I didn't want to leave out any of the details. I'm a 23-year-old female and I work in a department store at the jewelry counter. I've experienced a fair share of creeps while working there, but this guy really takes the cake. About 4 weeks ago, a guy kinda short and stocky who looks to be in his mid-30s comes up to the counter, and my coworker approaches him asking him what he can help him with. The guy's staring over at me and then says, "Well, actually, she always helps me when I shop here, so I would like to be helped by her if that's okay." I looked over at him and I didn't recognize this man at all, but I help so many people per day that I figured that maybe I have, but I just forgot. So I go over to him and ask him what he needs help with. He tells me that he wants to propose to his girlfriend and wants to look at engagement rings. I take him over to our ring section and begin to show him our engagement ring styles. I ask him questions to see what he's looking for, and it seems like he has no idea, which is not uncommon. A lot of guys don't know jewelry and it can be pretty intimidating. So I do my best to try and help him and find something she'll like. The whole time I'm trying to help him, I noticed that he kept staring at me. Like instead of looking down into the showcase to see the rings, he would just stare at me. I would have to say things like, "See these diamonds on the side?" just to get him to look down. I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable, but I tried to ignore it. Literally an hour goes by of me trying to help him find a ring, and no progress at all has been made. When I ask him what kind of styles he thinks that she would like from the ones we've looked at, he just says he doesn't know. When I asked if she wants white or yellow gold, he doesn't know. When I ask what her ring size is, he doesn't know. Then, as I'm trying to help him, he started going off topic, and he was telling me about some band that he's trying to get to perform at a party he's having, and he was asking if I had ever heard of this band. I say no and try to divert the attention back to the rings, and then he starts saying, "Well, money's really tight right now. Will you have better deals next week if I come back then?" I tell him that I'm not sure because our profile for next week hasn't come out yet, but that he can check back with us. He then does a 180 and pulls out his wallet with the biggest wad of cash in it and starts counting it, and then says, "Well, actually, money's not a problem," while staring at me. Then he starts going on about how he doesn't even know if he should buy a ring because he's scared she's not going to like it and he'll be so embarrassed. At this point, I'm getting really tired of helping him. It's over an hour. So basically I just said, "Sir, I would suggest browsing rings with your girlfriend. That way you'll get a feel of what she likes." He agrees and then finally leaves. I told my coworkers about how weird that whole situation was, especially him staring at me so much. They agreed, and eventually I continued working and forgot about it. A week later, the same guy comes back in. He asked for me, so I went over to him and said, "Have you finally decided on a style?" He says no and asks to see the selection of rings again. So we go back over and I start to show him. But again, he's constantly staring at me instead of looking down at the rings. And the stare was creepy. He always had a weird smile on his face while he would stare. I literally had to tell him to look down at the rings, otherwise he would just continue to stare at me. Also, this time he's now asking me more personal questions. He told me he's Hispanic, and he asked if I was too since I looked like it. I said no, and then he asked what I was. I'm Middle Eastern, so I told him, but I tried diverting the conversation back to the rings. Instead, he started going on about how he had a friend who was also Middle Eastern and was telling me stories about that. Then he started asking me how old I was and how long I've been working in jewelry for, and if I liked it. I vaguely answered his questions and then immediately went back to trying to discuss the rings. Again, he continued to stare at me and not look at anything I was showing him. At this point, it was pretty clear he had no intention of buying a ring and just wanted to talk to me. I told him once again to come back when he had a better idea of what his girlfriend would like. He finally left. 20 minutes later, I saw him walk back over to the counter, but thankfully I got tied up helping a customer for a while, so eventually he left. A week later goes by, and you guessed it, he's back. This time I was over in the costume jewelry section cleaning up, and the guy came up to the counter and asked for me. My coworker told him I was busy, but that she could help him. She knew that I was starting to get very creeped out by him. He just walked away and walked around trying to find me, when he eventually spotted me and then walked over saying, "Hey, I'm back." I looked over at him just thinking, oh crap, here we go again. I'll spare you the details, but he's literally doing the same thing he does every time. stared at me, doesn't know what he wants, asked me personal questions, wasting a full hour of my time. At this point, I was really done trying to help him. I told him that he shouldn't come back until he had a better idea of what his girlfriend would want, even though I knew that there most likely wasn't even a girlfriend. Finally, he leaves, and I tell my counter manager that I no longer want to help this guy out because I feel very uncomfortable. Even two of my coworkers saw how much he kept staring at me, and said while he was doing so, he had a creepy smile on his face and wouldn't look anywhere but at me, even though I'm trying to get him to look down at the rings. My manager told me that the next time he comes in, he'll tell this guy that I'm busy and that someone else can help him. Another week goes by from the last time I saw him. This happened 4 days ago, and here he comes. I was actually over in the watch section helping a lady resize her watch, when all of a sudden my manager comes power walking over to me and said he tried telling the guy I was busy and that he would help him, but the guy refused and just said he would wait. I look up from what I'm doing and I see the guy a few feet away by the watch counter waiting for me. He then says, "Hey there, I'm back, and this time I want to look at gold chains for myself." I look back at my manager and whisper that I'm uncomfortable helping him, but then he just says, "I'll stay close by. If he says or does anything weird, I'll tell him to leave." So I finish what I'm doing and go over to the jewelry. The guy follows and I show him our gold chains. He sees one that he likes and he asks to try it on. I say sure, take it out of the case and hand it to him, and then bring over a mirror. I literally see him put it on, clasp it, and then take it back off and ask if I can put it on him. I obviously didn't want to, but it was awkward, so I just said okay. He puts his head down and comes closer to the counter facing towards me. I quickly put it on and he looks at himself in the mirror and then starts staring back at me and asks if I like it. At this point, I'm really short with him and just say, "Mm-hmm." He then puts his head back down and says, "Take it off." So I do. He does this with 4 other chains. We actually had no sale going on, so I figured this would be a good reason to get him to leave. I tell him, "I remember you said you only like buying jewelry when we have deals going on. Well, right now we are completely off sale, so everything is ticket price. We aren't going to have a sale for another week or so." To which he then responds with, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I won't buy today. I'll just get ideas. I'll come back next week then too." I finally get him to leave after an hour, and my manager immediately tells me how much he saw this guy stared at me and how creepy it was. A couple hours go by, and our counter gets a phone call. My coworker answered it, and when I looked over at her, she was waving and gesturing me to come over. She then lowered the phone and whispered, "It's that guy," and then put the phone back to her ear. She told him, "No sir, she left for the day, but I can help you. What is your question?" Then he says something to which she responds with, "No, I'm not really sure when she's working next, but how can I help you?" Eventually she just hung up and told me that he kept asking when I was working next. Another hour goes by and we get another phone call. This time my manager answered, and sure enough, it was the guy. I listened to the conversation and my manager says, "No, she left for the day. I'm the jewelry manager though, so allow me to help you." This guy says that he wants to only speak with me because I know what he's talking about since we looked at so much stuff. My manager asked him for his name and phone number and says I'll call him back. So after my manager hangs up, he tells me to call the guy back and just see what the hell he wants. I told him, "But didn't you say I left for the day?" And he told me to just say that I was still in the store shopping after my shift and that my manager flagged me down to call him back. So I hesitantly call him and he picks up after the first ring. I ask him what he wants and he asked if I'll be in later that night. I told him that I was actually off the clock, which was a total lie, but that my jewelry manager would be more than happy to help him. He then says, "Well, I live far, and if I come in, I would like to be when you are there. Are you there tomorrow?" I didn't answer this question and again reiterated that my manager could help. I then told him, "But remember earlier when you were here I said there was no sale? Why don't you wait for a sale?" And his answer didn't make any sense. He just kept saying that he wanted to come back in. Eventually I hung up and I told my manager about the call. He said that he believes this is the same guy who called 3 months ago asking about me. So let me rewind. 3 months ago, on my day off, my coworker and manager told me about 2 weird phone calls that they received regarding me. They said the first call they got, my coworker answered, and the guy on the other end asked if I was there, saying, "Is Jessica still there? I think that's her name. She's the tall, really pretty girl, right?" When my coworker said I wasn't there, he asked if he could get my entire schedule for the whole week. My coworker told him that we don't give that out, and then the guy said, "Well, can I get her number?" My coworker just hung up and thought it was someone pulling a prank. Then 10 minutes later, the same guy called back, and this time my manager answered. The guy basically asked the same thing, if he could get my number or work schedule so he could come back in when I'm there. When my manager asked what he needed help with, the guy didn't elaborate, and he just said he wanted to speak with me. My manager and I both think that those calls from 3 months ago are all linked to this same guy, since my manager and coworker both agreed that he sounded the same. My manager said that this is getting ridiculous, and that I should call the local police department to report his creepy behavior. So I did, and they basically said that this is very stalkerish and there's nothing normal about his interactions with me. They said I should tell my boss to put a trespass ban on him so that he can no longer come into the store, and if he starts acting belligerent, to call the police and he'll be arrested for trespassing, and that if anything else happens, to give them a call back. The next day I told HR about this since the store manager was off, and they took notes and said they're going to open an HR case and see about the ban. They would need a last name to make the ban official, but I don't know his last name. They basically told me they'll work on it, and in the meantime, if he comes back, to just leave the counter and to come sit in the office until he leaves. I've actually been off for the last couple of days, so I obviously haven't seen him, but I'm dreading the next encounter with him. I'm just going to go to the office and make no contact with him. I'm not even going to look at him. Hopefully he stops coming in. I've never felt this uncomfortable before with a customer.
Between 8th to 10th grade, I was deeply involved in a small Minecraft building server. The average age of the players was probably 15 to 17 years old, and we Skyped almost every day for hours. We quickly grew close and would follow each other on other social media platforms. I became really close with one member in particular. His name was Peter. He was in the same grade as me, and I heard rumors that he might have had a crush on me. Rumors that he denied. I found the idea laughable, since we only knew each other online. We were in the same grade, but not in the same school, so I brushed it off, and things were okay for a while. But eventually something felt off. During our conversations, I started catching him in small lies, which bothered me. Deciding it was time to distance myself, I stopped talking to him. A few months later, after no contact, Peter texted me out of the blue. He said that he might transfer to my high school to qualify for an in-state college tuition. His plan was to live alone and support himself while still in high school. My stomach dropped. This felt very wrong and out of nowhere. Still trying to stay calm, I told him that his plan was absolutely insane and pointed out how oddly convenient it was that he just happened to choose the school that I attended. But he insisted that this was a coincidence and that his plan would work. I really hoped that he was bluffing, just messing around. But a short time later, he claimed that he had already purchased plane tickets to visit my high school and stay in my town. Fear washed over me as I realized that Peter was serious and had an unhealthy attachment to me. He wasn't bluffing. To my horror, he posted a Snapchat photo from the airport. He asked me to meet up while he was in town, but I denied. Later on, his Snapchat account showed him touring my high school, taking videos and pictures, likely hoping that I would see them. Fortunately, I was home with pneumonia that day and didn't have to face him. Over the next few days, I was on edge, terrified that he would show up at my door. Luckily, he never figured out where I lived, and eventually he flew back home, abandoning his plan. Shockingly, the rest of our online group never thought his behavior was creepy. I felt like I was going crazy for finding it severely disturbing. I hoped my rejection of the meetup and continued silence would end things. But 2 years later, after I committed to my dream college, Peter popped up again. I had, foolishly, kept following him on social media to monitor if he was ever near me. Then I saw it, a photo of him posing in front of my college's library, captioned, "Transferring here is definitely the move." I don't know if he ever did, but I never ran into him on campus. A few months later, he found out that I had a boyfriend and contacted me on Skype for the first time in 2 years. "Do you think he's going to protect you?" Out of fear, I blocked him and unfollowed him on all social media. I admit that I made mistakes back then. I was young, scared, and surrounded by people telling me this wasn't a big deal. He hasn't tried to contact me since, but that doesn't mean he isn't still watching me. Over the weekend, I checked my Skype account for the first time in months. I had a contact request from the username Young Love Money. Curious, I added them to see more of their info. It didn't reveal much. Later that day, the account tried calling me. I didn't answer. I had zero desire to speak to someone I didn't know. Then the rogue account sent 5 messages. "Hey. How are you? You there? What's up? Hello?" Another call came through, then another, and another. The account kept changing its username as well. The calls came every 5 minutes or so. Soon, the messages turned angry and sexual. "What the fuck? How come you're not answering? I can't stop thinking about how I'm gonna fuck you. I want you to see what it looks like." There was more, but you get the idea. I blocked the user, but the calls and messages persisted from other accounts. I just ended up logging off my computer. My boyfriend was coming over that night, and I would deal with this later. Later on, my boyfriend and I went to my father's house to watch a football game with him and some other family members. He and my mother had split up some time ago. He now lives with my brother, his current wife, and her son. While I was there, I was now receiving nasty text messages on my phone. On the drive over, I had told my boyfriend what was going on with my Skype account, and I was now getting the same kind of messages on my phone. He suggested I call a number to see who picked up. I did. And here's where things get a bit fucked. My stepbrother's Skype started ringing. The mobile app has a distinct tone, so I knew right then and there he had been the culprit all along. He scrambled for his phone and stopped the call just as mine hung up. He then bolted upstairs and didn't come back down for the rest of the night. My stepbrother is a 29-year-old, 6'4", 260-pound, jobless man-child. He would always make me feel uncomfortable with his temper, space-invading habits, and inappropriate jokes at odd times. Now I was extremely nervous. I didn't want to tell my dad though, for fear of putting his marriage under strain. Plus, I kinda knew his mom would side with her son anyway, and act like he had done nothing wrong. She's part of the reason he behaves this way. My real brother, who also lives there, has had some issues with him as well. But nothing ever gets done about it. My stepmother just laughs and says, "Oh, he's just giving you a hard time." Of course, my father is next to useless when it comes to this situation, which is super painful because my brother and I genuinely care about him a lot. My stepmother claims that her son has emotional issues and can't work because of his condition. I guess we're going to have to add only child syndrome to the DSM-5. Imagine being married to a woman who has a 29-year-old son who throws temper tantrums until he gets his way, and she always brushes it off like it's nothing. Now, hold on to your pants, because we're not done yet. Not by a long shot. There's more to this jigsaw puzzle. And if you're thinking that this is a story about my creepy stepbrother, you're only half right. The true horror of this story is my father's absolute failures, plural, when it comes to his relationships. My dad bends over backwards to avoid upsetting his wife, even at the expense of his own children. We had major issues with his last wife, the one he married after divorcing my mom. She turned out to be an attractive drug addict and a cheater. There was a time where he stopped seeing me because his wife was jealous of me. If she didn't want him to go somewhere, he would just stay home, and he would be upset with my brother and I if we complained about it in any way, accusing us of trying to wreck his new marriage. Once she was involved in a hit and run and claimed that I had borrowed her car and I was the one who did it. My father backed her up, telling me to stop lying and confess, but the police were able to prove that it was in fact her behind the wheel, not me. So yeah, my father is a bit of a fucking moron, and it took quite some time for our relationship to mend after that. My dad is fine with his current wife's son living there, because he's been sold on this condition from the start. Here is another fun fact. My father and my current stepmom were high school sweethearts once upon a time, and they were actually married before my dad met my mom when they were in their early 20s. Things didn't work out, and they ended up divorcing. 30 years later, they run into each other at a gas station and began dating again. They eventually remarried this past August. I actually get along with her quite well, and she is very good to my father. She just has a messed up son who's going to ruin everything. It's sad, but it is what it is. I'm not too worried for myself. I'm never alone with him. And I think this was a twisted game for my stepbrother's amusement. Like, haha, you don't know it's me. That was the initial plan anyway, until I caught him red-handed. I feel like he was using his Skype account to anonymously confess those things to me, and now I know he has had those thoughts. But I haven't heard from him since. Now whenever I visit my dad, he stays upstairs, never coming down. The holidays are going to be very awkward for us though. I don't want to exchange gifts or even be near my stepbrother at all. I've always found him creepy, but this was a whole new level of insanity. This is a story about learning things the hard way. You can roll your eyes and point out all the bad decisions I made, and you would be right. But I would argue that good decisions can only be made with the knowledge of bad experiences. Let me start from the beginning. I'm a female, and I once had a friend who I thought of as a brother, someone I could talk to and trust with my deepest secrets. I met him at school during a sports day in my 4th year of secondary school. We'll call him Joshua. It was the last day before the holidays. We hung out with a group of others. We were laughing and enjoying ourselves. Afterward, we exchanged Facebook info. He didn't message me until midway through the holiday break, just saying hi and checking in. I was quite a bit of a loner back then, and I hadn't had a real friend since primary school, so I was flattered. We started talking on a regular basis. Around this time, I was moving houses, and he mentioned that he only lived 10 to 15 minutes away, meaning that we could hang out sometimes. I was excited. I had never had a friend over before, so it felt like a new experience. A year later, we were best friends. We discovered our mutual interests, walked around town, went to movies, swam, shared secrets. We did everything. But this is where things take a turn for the worse. He wanted this to be something more, but I just didn't have those feelings for Josh. In fact, I had a boyfriend named Charlie, and Josh was aware of this. He insisted that Charlie didn't treat me right, that I wasn't meant to be with him, or was talking behind my back. When I asked for proof of this, he would go silent and not say anything. Hindsight is always 20/20, and looking back, I'm a bit embarrassed of the position that I put myself in. I admit that I friend-zoned Josh hard, and it was causing problems. But at the time I didn't seem to care that much, and in fact I found him to be annoying. He kept trying to join Skype calls I would have with Charlie, who I rarely got to speak to between his job and my studies. We usually declined Josh joining, and he would get upset, messaging me, "If you were really my friend, you would let me join," only to apologize 30 minutes later for being childish. All of my online friends, including Josh, knew that I was a big-time gamer. I recently started playing a new game that I didn't want to tell Josh about. Because of what was going on at the time, I didn't want him following me, even in cyberspace. He had done this twice before, always nagging me to play together. I found a great guild, raiding twice a week for a few hours, and things are going great. A week later, Josh found out through a mutual friend, signed up, and joined my guild. I knew it was him. He always used the same username. Apparently he was trash-talking me behind my back, harassing female members, and just generally annoying everyone. He thought everything he said was hilarious. Every other sentence was a bad reference. He would disrupt our raids by joining our voice channel and blasting loud music. He was eventually booted. Frankly, he got what he deserved. After he had been bad-mouthing me behind my back and deciding enough was enough, I called him on Skype and ended our friendship. He didn't take it well. He cursed me out, threatened to leak all my secrets to my friends, and said that he would ruin my life. I hung up, blocked him, and thanked God that he was gone. Or so I thought. I had forgotten that he knew where I lived. I've been avoiding him for a month, prioritizing time with my guild, and just not wanting to deal with him. 3 weeks after cutting him off, I noticed something disturbing. I'm a diagnosed insomniac, and sometimes I gaze at the street lamps outside. That's when I saw Josh standing under the street lamp closest to my house. My room has a balcony outside the window. It's easy to climb, with its ledges and pipes. I've even snuck down that way before. I usually kept my window open because my room is so warm at night. At the time, I didn't have a fan, and the AC unit was broken, but that week had been freezing, so the window was closed. 15 minutes later, I saw him approaching my house and started climbing. I was so grateful that I had closed the window that night. It would have been easy to slip through otherwise. I turned off my monitor and sat there in the dark, shaking, with my teeth chattering, but still trying my best to stay quiet. I couldn't leave my room. The creak of the floorboards would have gave me away, and he could easily hear me from the balcony. I could not scream for help either. My mom was out drinking, and my younger sister was at my grandparents' house. I was alone, and watched in terror as he approached the window. He tried opening the window, but it wouldn't budge from the outside. So he just sat there, staring into my bedroom. It became a waiting game. Minutes felt like hours. I had this awful feeling that if I made any noise, he would leap up and smash his way through. Around 5 a.m., my mom's car pulled into the driveway. Relief washed over me. She actually saw Josh and began yelling at him. I heard him scrambling back down the pipes. She initially thought that I had invited him over, but when I explained to her what was going on, she hugged me and said that she was glad I was okay. We called the police, but they said they couldn't do anything since he hadn't assaulted me. It's been a year and a half now. I haven't seen or heard from Joshua since. He just simply vanished. Maybe that's for the best. Wherever you are, Joshua, I hope you got some help and moved on, because you came extremely close to going down a very dark path.
Let me tell you a story. So the other day, I was just hanging around on my computer, same old teenager things. I'm usually logged onto Skype while I'm on the computer and leave it there in case a friend wanted to randomly call me. So it didn't surprise me all too much when I got a sudden Skype call as I was browsing Facebook. What did surprise me though was that I couldn't see who it was that was calling me. There was no name. There was just a blank space where there was usually a username to tell me who was trying to contact me. I figured it was just one of my friends playing a prank on me, so I just said the hell with it and accepted the call. There wasn't anybody there. It was completely black, so I hollered a hello. No response. There was nothing coming from my headphones. Not even the random background noise you hear when no one's speaking through the microphone. I decided to type out a message, simply sending another hello. There was no response to that either. I decided I would just leave it, but for some reason I opened up another window instead of ending the call. Just as I opened up Facebook again, I got a Skype message back. Don't back away from me. Well, that was pretty creepy, I thought. I decided to message back. Who is this? Suddenly, the sound turned on, and I heard a loud, wheezing laugh. The camera was still black, but then it flickered. I couldn't make out what I saw at all. It was like trying to catch and remember perfectly a single frame during a movie reel with your naked eye. Almost impossible. I figured it had to be one of my friends playing a prank on me. But don't get me wrong, it was working. I was scared witless. This time, I decided to speak fiercely. Are you going to tell me who you are, dick? I heard the wheezing laughter again, but this time, it came from behind me. I was almost sure of it. Not from my headphones. I spun around quickly, but it was far too dark to see anything. With a black screen from my Skype call and a dark wallpaper background, there wasn't enough bright light to see anything around my room. I decided I must be getting paranoid, and it was from my headphones, so I turned back around to the computer screen. I saw a small, dim light on the Skype video call. It seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. I shivered as I moved my head forward to get a closer look, and saw a person's head move over the dim light of the screen. That was my head.
In early 2004, I worked as a pizza delivery driver in a small town of New Jersey. We were known to be the best pizza in town and relatively new, so the store got a lot of orders from locals. Hell, we even got orders outside of our delivery radius. We were that popular. Anyway, it was a Wednesday night if I remember correctly, and we hadn't received many orders due to it being a weeknight. When business was slow, my boss would allow us to go in the computer in the back room if we had nothing to do. Mind you, this was 2004, so the computer in the back room was really the only form of entertainment we had. At some point, I had been online playing on one of those internet browser games when the store got a call. On the other end was an elderly man asking for a medium pie. It was only 15 minutes away, and it wasn't a busy night, so I had no problem doing that drive. Now, let's fast forward to when I was on the road. I had decided to take a shortcut through some smaller back roads that I had never taken before. According to my GPS, the back roads would get me to my destination about 5 minutes before, so I couldn't go wrong with that. I remember taking a right and made my way onto the road that would lead me to where I needed to go. There were trees on both sides of this road, and you couldn't see anything more than 4 feet in front of you. I'll admit, it was a bit spooky navigating through this road, but I had dismissed it as me being paranoid due to the eerie nature of it. Suddenly, about 2 to 3 minutes later, my headlights catch someone crawling onto the road soaking wet. I yell out an "oh shit" and swerve around this person, making sure to not hit them. When I look in my rearview mirror, I see this person stand up and just stare down as I drive by. After getting a decent look, I came to the realization that it was a woman drenched in water. There was a river right next to this road, so I could only assume she had gotten out from there and onto the road seeking help. But her appearance and the way she crawled out from the trees was so abnormal and definitely had me shaken up. I made it to the customer's house and was given a $10 tip for my service. On the way back, I had taken the same route hoping to find the woman, but never did. This was ultimately the creepiest thing I've ever encountered in my years of delivering food, and nothing ever became of that woman.
Austin was a college student who worked at a small local pizza place and got delivery right before closing. When he took down their address, he saw it was a bad area of town and thought to himself jokingly, "I'm probably going to get robbed." The order was less than $20, but they asked if he could give change for $100, and he said no. Well, I'm probably definitely getting robbed, he thought, still joking to himself. He drove to the neighborhood, not somewhere you'd want to be after 1 a.m., pulled up to the house. There were no lights on anywhere, but he could see an outline of 2 people sitting on that dimly lit porch. Oh my God, I might actually get robbed, he kept thinking to himself. He walked up to the dark house and approached the 2 men on the porch to deliver the food. One of them was comically short. "So, do you have change for the 100? One of them asked. Austin said no and reminded them he had told them this over the phone. They said nothing. The short guy went inside the still dark house to get money. Austin stood outside awkwardly with the other man, who just stared at him wordlessly. 2 minutes passed, then 5 minutes, then 10. The pizza was already starting to get cold. The house was still pitch black inside. The other guy just kept staring at Austin. Austin had a bad feeling and began to feel genuinely uncomfortable. He looked at his cell phone clock and saw his shift should have ended a little while back. Feeling freaked out, he told the guy, "Well, my shift is over and I have to get home. Consider the pizza free." He turned around and started to walk off the porch back to his car. About halfway there, the porch light came on and he heard the door shut, and for a split second remembered seeing both their shadows, one long and one comically short. A half a second later, he heard a swooping sound as they both leapt off the porch. A half second later, one guy grabbed Austin by the arm and pulled a knife on him. The short one held his other arm. "You're not going anywhere," he said. The first thought to go through Austin's head was that he was right about being robbed. The second was that this was a horrible way to say thank you for a free pizza. Now, Austin had taken martial arts lessons in the past, but he had no practice. He was strong and stubborn. In the heat of the moment, he tore his arm free from the short man and used his pizza bag as a shield against the knife, and turned and tried to do some kind of Mortal Kombat move on the side of the guy's face. He said, in fact, afterwards it seemed like a better idea in his head. Austin missed the side of the man's head, and his fingers plunged straight into the guy's eye socket. Austin freaked out at holding what felt like a grape and pulled his hand away, and then inadvertently popped the guy's eyeball out of the socket. You read that right. All three of them started screaming at the same time. The one guy because his eye just been torn out of its socket, Austin because he realized what he had just done, and the short guy because he had just witnessed the whole thing and ran screaming into the darkness somewhere behind the house. Austin picked up the dropped knife and called 911 while the guy lay writhing on the walkway. Upon telling the operator what had transpired, about 5 police cars showed up. The officers think the situation's hilarious, calling the man on the ground a pirate. They ask Austin to describe the short guy, and he does. And one of them says, "Hang on." The 2 disappear behind the house. 10 minutes later, they come back with him. They all know this man. Evidently, they had been to his house many times before, and he was a repeat offender. Austin went to the police station to give a statement, where several employees in earshot asked him to relay the story again. Austin received a nice raise and worked at the same pizza place until he graduated.
I work full-time as a pizza delivery driver for a relatively popular pizza chain. I've done this for almost a year now, as I'm putting what money I made to pay for college. Don't ask me how I can manage both my job and school at the same time because, to tell you the truth, I have no idea. I would work mostly during the week, so I would constantly be doing deliveries left and right. Also, I live in Savannah, Georgia, so I'd pretty much be doing it every second. I had just returned to the restaurant after a good 3 hours of doing deliveries, only to get another one. Thankfully, it wasn't too far of a drive, and it was only 1 pie, so I felt relieved I didn't have to do much. I bring the pizza to the car and input the address into my phone. Out of curiosity, I copy and paste the address into Google Earth just to see what the house was like. For whatever reason, I've always had the habit of doing this, even if it felt stalkerish. The house was this older, rundown, 2-storied mansion made of red brick. An absolute dream of a house if it had been maintained better. Right away, I started to get excited, as wealthier people tend to tip more than most. I was at the house within about 10 minutes with the pizza still hot so the customer would be satisfied. Let me tell you, you don't understand how many people would complain if their pizza came even slightly cold. I walk up to the house and ring the doorbell, and that's when I hear slow footsteps coming to the door and then stopping. "Delivery for Dan?" I yelled out. There was silence for a good minute, however, I knew someone was behind the door, so they could definitely hear me. Mind you, it's about 40 degrees outside, so the longer I waited, the colder the pizza got. Finally, I heard the door unlock, and was greeted to an older woman staring at me. For a second, I thought I had the wrong house, as the person who placed the order was a man. Out of nowhere, she begins to speak, saying that Dan was her son and that he had just left the house and that he'd be back. In the meantime, she had invited me inside, where it was a lot warmer. As much as it felt wrong, it was getting colder by the minute, and I actually accepted. I step inside and realized that it wasn't as warm as she said it was. Maybe a little warm, but definitely not by a landslide. She had offered me something to eat while I waited, but our policy states that we couldn't accept food from customers. I waited in that house, still freezing my ass off for a good 10 minutes before telling her that I'd just leave the pizza here. She gave me a nod and watched me as I proceeded to open the front door. The second I did, I heard the most blood-curdling shriek coming from upstairs that echoed across the house. I look upstairs into the pitch-black darkness and then back at the woman, who then said something that made my blood run cold.
"I think it's time for you to leave, hon."
However, her sentence is not what scared me the most. It was her tone, the way she said it, almost as if it was a warning to leave now. You bet your life I was out of that house in seconds, not caring about any sort of tip or pay at this point. Fear is not enough to describe what I felt. You had to be there to hear what I heard. It didn't even sound human. I basically floored it down the road, not looking back, while calling my manager about it. I could tell he was in a bitchy mood and just told me to keep delivering orders and not to worry about it. As much as I wanted to call the police, I felt that I could have lost my job had I done so. The rest of my day went by as usual, with only one complaint about the incorrect toppings. Other than that, I made a bag with tips at the end of the day. This was about a week ago, and I still have no idea what made that screaming noise upstairs. I'd like to think that it was some sort of sick joke that was being played, but maybe that's because I'd rather not think of the alternative.
I'll never forget this night. The pizza place I worked at was about to close, and I was getting ready to go home when the phone rang. I was working the counter alone that night, so I was taking calls. I picked up the phone. There was complete silence, so I hung up. About a minute later, the phone rang again, so I picked up. Still silence. I was about to hang up again when I heard the very weak and cold voice of an old woman on the other end. She said she wanted a regular pie delivered. I remained polite on the phone, but on the inside I was screaming. I just wanted to get home and end my shift. I called out to my boss that someone was requesting a delivery, and of course, guess what? He told me I had to go. I was upset at first, but I realized it was another tip, and the old ones usually tip the most, so I decided to go through with it. I wrote down the address, told her it would be there soon, but she had already hung up the phone. I thought to myself how rude that was, but I ignored it and yelled to the chef that I needed one more regular. My boss told me to just go home after the delivery, as the place would be closed. So a little before 10 o'clock, I got in my car, put the address and the GPS on my phone. The house was 7 miles away. The GPS took me to the quiet side of town. I arrived at the house. It was a small one-floor home on a very quiet and empty street. I took the pizza and walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. There were no lights on in the house. I hoped that she hadn't given me the wrong address. I rang the doorbell again. There was still no answer. I was about to give up when I turned my head and saw someone standing at the window. I got a little freaked out and backed up at first, but I eventually got closer to the window to see a person. It was an old woman, probably in her late 70s. She was just staring at me with a blank expression. I yelled at her through the glass that I had her pizza. She didn't react to what I said, so I screamed it louder. A large smile ran across her face. Not a pleasant, genuine smile. It was a smile that sent chills down my entire spine. I still remember that exact same face she made through the window. I decided that I was freaked out enough and got back to my car and set the pizza down in the passenger seat. I had to text my boss about this. After I shot him a quick message, I started my car ready to get the hell out of there. I looked to my right to get one more look to see the woman, standing right outside my passenger side window, giving me the same stare she'd given me before. Put my car in drive and floored it down the street, never looking back. My boss never made me do a late night delivery again.
Delivering food at night is usually peaceful. The roads are clear, there's no rush, and you just hop from one house to another, dropping off burgers and pizzas while listening to music or podcasts. I've always liked it. It's kind of meditative, actually. Just me, the dark streets, and my thoughts. But that night felt different, and not in a good way. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., and I'd been driving for a few hours. I only had one more order to deliver before I called it a night. It wasn't a long run, just another drop-off at some out-of-the-way spot on the edge of town. You know how it is, long roads with no one around, houses way spread out, and no streetlights anywhere. It was a pizza and a soda. Easy. I grabbed the food from the restaurant, threw it in the passenger seat, and punched the address into my GPS. It was about 15 minutes away. I figured I'd drop it off, maybe get a nice tip, and then head home. I started driving, the streets quickly getting quieter as I left the busier parts of town behind. It was one of those clear nights, the sky pitch black except for a few stars. All I could hear was my engine humming and the trees rustling when the wind kicked up. The further I drove, the emptier the roads became, with houses becoming more spaced out until they pretty much disappeared entirely. Normally, this wouldn't bother me. I liked the isolation at night, but something about this particular drive felt off. I was maybe 5 minutes into the drive when I noticed a car behind me. It wasn't tailgating or anything. It was keeping a fair distance, but I could see the headlights in my rearview mirror, and for some reason, that bugged me. I looked at the road ahead, empty, and then back at the car. It was strange seeing another vehicle out here this late. I tried to shake it off. Plenty of people drive late at night. Maybe they were headed in the same direction. Shouldn't be a problem, right? I kept driving, the car still behind me, always at the same distance. It wasn't close enough to feel like it was tailing me, but it wasn't far enough to feel like a coincidence either. I figured maybe they'd pass me eventually. But they didn't. They just stayed there, like a shadow, always a few car lengths behind. I looked at the GPS, 10 minutes to go. I could handle 10 more minutes of this. As the minutes ticked by, I started to feel the tension creeping in. That car was still behind me, keeping pace no matter how fast or slow I went. I tried to rationalize it again. Maybe they lived out here too. Maybe they were just headed home, just like me. But something about it wasn't sitting right. I made a turn onto a smaller road, about the kind with only one lane in each direction and barely any shoulder to pull over on. The road twisted and turned, dipping into small valleys and rising back up again, with thick woods on either side. The kind of road where it feels like you're the only person for miles. Except I wasn't alone. The headlights were still there, still following, as steady as ever. I got that gut feeling, the one that screams something's off, even if you can't figure out why. I checked the GPS again. 5 minutes left, just 5 more minutes. I took another turn, this time onto a road that was barely lit. The trees on either side closing in like a tunnel. The car behind me took the turn too. Now I couldn't shake it anymore. There was no way they were just casually going in the same direction. I wasn't even sure this road led to anywhere else. I sped up, trying to put some distance between us, but the car sped up too. That was it. No more rationalizing. I was being followed. My heart was racing. What the hell did they want? Were they trying to rob me? Was it some psycho messing with me? I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just keep driving and hope they'd lose interest. I wasn't going to lead them to the customer's house either. No way. So I made a split-second decision. Up ahead, I saw a small dirt road branching off the main one. I didn't know where it led, but it didn't matter. I turned the wheel hard, veering onto the dirt road without thinking. The tires skidded on the gravel, kicking up dust as I sped down the narrow path, the headlights behind me disappearing for a second as I rounded the bend. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing. For a brief moment, I thought I'd lost them, but then just as quickly as they'd vanished, the headlights appeared again, bouncing over the uneven terrain as the car turned onto the same dirt road. I let out a low curse. This wasn't going to be easy. The dirt road twisted and turned, narrowing even more as I drove deeper into the woods. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stop. The other car was getting closer, the headlights growing brighter in the rearview mirror. They were catching up. I tried to stay calm, keep my focus on the road ahead, but the fear was clawing its way up, making it harder to think straight. I could hear the tires crunching over the gravel, the branches scraping against the side of my car as I sped past. The road ahead split into 2 paths. I had no idea where either of them went, but I didn't have time to think. I took the left path, hoping it would lead somewhere, anywhere, that would get me out of this mess. The car behind me took the right path. For a second, I didn't understand what had just happened. Why hadn't they followed me? Why had they taken the other path? But then, it hit me. They didn't need to follow me. They knew these roads better than I did. They were cutting me off. The moment I realized what was happening, my heart was beating out of my chest. They were going to loop around and block me off. I slammed on the gas, pushing my car to its limit as I tore down the winding dirt road, the trees blurring past me. I had to get out of here. I had to find a way back to the main road before they could cut me off. But the road was getting rougher, the ruts and rocks making it harder to keep control. I could feel the car struggling, the wheels skidding on the loose dirt. Up ahead, I saw the trees thinning out, the road starting to straighten. I was almost there, almost back to safety. And then, just as I thought I was in the clear, I saw it. The car was there, parked sideways across the road, blocking my path. The headlights were off, but I could see the dark outline of the vehicle, waiting for me. They had gotten there first. I hit the brakes, the tires screeching as the car skidded to a stop just a few feet away from the other car. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing for a way out. There was no turning around. The road was too narrow and they'd catch up with me before I could get far. I looked at the car blocking the road, but I couldn't see who was inside. The windows were tinted and the headlights were still off. It was just sitting there, silent, waiting. And then the driver's side door opened. I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas, backing up as fast as I could without losing control. The car in front of me didn't move, but I could feel the tension, like something was about to snap. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just needed to get away. The dirt road was bumpy, my car jolting with every turn, but I kept going, not daring to look back. I could hear the engine of the other car revving behind me, but I didn't stop. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw the main road ahead. The trees opened up, the dirt road giving way to asphalt. I sped onto the road without looking, my tires screeching as I merged back onto the highway. I didn't stop until I was miles away, the darkness of the woods far behind me. I never found out who was in that car or why they were following me. Maybe they were just messing with me, trying to scare me. Or maybe it was something worse. All I know is that I didn't want to find out. I kept driving, not stopping until I was back in town, the lights of the city making me feel a little safer. But even now, whenever I drive down those dark, empty roads at night, I keep checking the rearview mirror, waiting for those damn headlights to appear again. Because out there in the dark, you never know who's following you, or why.
This story takes place in St. Louis during the summer of 2016. There was this weird clown fiasco going on in America back then. There were random sightings of people dressed as clowns and holding knives, most of them being just for scares. However, when a trend like this happens, it can and will bring out people who are truly disturbed. The details are a bit foggy for me. Not only did this happen some time ago, but I still have trauma from this event. That night, my friend Max and I wanted to go urban exploring at the site of an abandoned cement factory just north of the city. Max was 160 pounds, about 5'10", and I'm a 5'5" female and was around 140 pounds at the time. This particular area in St. Louis is called Cement Land. Think of it as an incomplete adult playground, made from the remains of the factory. The creator died halfway through its construction, leaving the place only half built. It now sits crumbling and abandoned. Cement Land is incredibly easy to access, and once you're inside, it is a huge place full of twists, turns, and multiple structures to explore. Truly a dream come true for a person like me. This night was not my first rodeo. However, this would be the last time I was there. I remember climbing the ladder to one of the tallest buildings on site. Max had gone up first. The ladder led to different levels until you got to the top. We were heading to the 5th level when we saw someone at the end of the hallway. This person was very large, extremely tall, wearing a frowning clown mask, and held what looked like a plank of wood in his hand. Max was the first to see him, he started calling out to him, thinking it was a prank. "Hey buddy, nice costume. You know Halloween isn't for like 3 more months, right?" Max started throwing clumps of dirt in his direction and laughing like a moron. The figure just stood there, as still as a statue, staring at us. He seemed to be glaring at me in particular. Those old paintings of frowning clowns always creeped me out, but seeing one in real life, in an abandoned building, caused a very unsettling feeling to grow in the pit of my stomach. After a few minutes of the figure just staring at us, I could tell that even Max was starting to get concerned. "I don't have a good feeling about this. Let's just get the hell out of here, Max." "Yeah, me either. Let's go." We turned away and made it about halfway back down the hallway when we heard someone say in the deepest voice I've ever heard, "Where do you think you're going, sweetheart?" We looked back to see the figure now sprinting directly towards us. We ran as fast as we could to the ladder. Max made it there first, practically jumping down to the next floor. As I began quickly making my way down the ladder, I felt a hand grab the back of my head, then started pulling. I was able to grab the side of the ladder and pull myself out of the clown's grip, but it cost me some hair in the process. I ended up sliding 3 floors down to the 2nd story. If I hadn't been wearing a pair of Easton batting gloves, there wouldn't have been any skin left on my palms. My landing was rough, and I completely blacked out. My memory gets fuzzy from this point. Not only was my head in a world of pain, but I also felt a shooting pain up my thigh. I do remember stumbling out of the building, with Max practically dragging me. I remember seeing blood running down my leg. I also saw the frowning clown one last time, looking through a window on the 5th floor. That's an image burned into my head, forever. The next thing I know, we're in the car, on the way home. I guess when I jumped off the ladder, I ended up landing on a hefty piece of metal, which left a decent-sized wound in my thigh. If it wasn't for the adrenaline, I probably would have had to wait for an ambulance to get me out of there. I ended up at the hospital with 23 stitches and a big bill to go with it. To this day, I have never returned to Cement Land. Who knows what that man would have done to me if he had caught me alone, or what he would have done to Max if he had tried to fight him. Every time I see that scar on my leg, I'm reminded of the most terrifying night of my life. This is something that happened to me 14 years ago, but still thinking about it now gives me the chills. I used to live in a small town in Missouri with my mother and my stepfather. Our house was a few miles outside of town, along an old state highway. We were pretty isolated out there, other than the occasional passing car or trucks carrying farm equipment. One day, I came home from a morning shift, and I was pretty tired, so I immediately came through the front door and sprawled out on the couch. My parents were going to go into town to visit a family friend, so I just put on a movie and quickly drifted off to sleep. I must have been out for a couple of hours before I was woken up to the sound of the front door creaking open. I figured my parents had returned from their friend's house, so I just laid there silently, hoping to fall back asleep. After a few minutes of silence, I heard an unfamiliar voice say, "Where is everybody?" My eyes shot open, and I looked up to see someone standing over me. I had never seen this man before. He was tall and muscular, wearing a white t-shirt with cut-off sleeves. He was also covered head to toe in blood. I jumped to my feet instantly. I had never been so scared before in my life. Trying to rationalize, I asked, "Are you looking for my parents?" I know it sounds like a stupid question to ask, but I was still a bit disoriented. He stared at me for a moment before asking, "Who are you?" "Who are you? What the fuck are you doing in my house?" I replied, He stared at me blankly. I thought I was going to be murdered. He kept babbling incoherently and asking where everyone was. I had no idea what he was referring to. After about 5 minutes, I realized that the blood that was all over his clothes and face was his own. I glanced out the living room window toward the highway. It was then that I began to understand. In the drainage ditch in front of my house was a red pickup truck. I told the man to come with me, and we went outside. Soon after we got near the wrecked truck, another vehicle pulled up. Apparently, the man had been driving drunk and had driven his truck into the ditch. He was intoxicated and had a concussion from the impact. He was so messed up that he thought other people were in the truck with him. Thankfully, he had been alone and stumbled into the nearest house looking for help, which happened to be mine. The driver that pulled up drove the man to the hospital. As far as I know, he was okay. In hindsight, I understand the situation, but in the moment, I saw an unknown man, covered in blood, standing over me. That was absolutely terrifying. It was the winter of 2015. I was a single 31-year-old female with a lifetime of experience doing risky things on my own, without consequence. During this time, I was working at a doctor's office in Branson, Missouri. I had just gotten a new iPhone, and I was excited to try out the time-lapse mode on the camera. On my drive home from work one evening, I decided to stop and capture the sunset over Table Rock Lake. It was a gorgeous evening, and the winter sun would be setting soon. I parked my SUV at a state park parking lot. My vehicle was the only one in sight, but I didn't find that to be alarming. I hopped out and quickly realized how incredibly chilly it was. It was sunny, but it was blistering cold. I opened the back of my vehicle and put on some gloves and a better pair of shoes. I then took off down the trail that led to the edge of the lake. I noticed a showboat making its way across the lake for its sunset voyage, and I thought it would be neat to capture it in the time lapse. The path down to the water was marked with large rocks on each side. I was in a hurry to get down to the shore and into recording position. I lost my footing and fell down hard. My head rested on a pointy-shaped big rock that I think would have knocked me out had I not managed to literally stop the impact at the moment we collided. My knee and one of my hands was in a lot of pain. It suddenly hit me how stupid this was, because nobody knew where I was, and I nearly incapacitated myself on a vacant trail, in freezing temperatures, within minutes away of being dark. As I sat there, recovering from my fall, I decided I was close enough to shore. I would just film right here, where I fell. I was about to find out that falling down was the least of my worries. "You got a light?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned around, and there he was. Standing about 20 feet behind me was a man. Sorry, I don't smoke." "I saw you getting out of your car up there. Couldn't help but notice. You're alone." Where had he been? There wasn't a soul in sight when I parked and headed down the trail. This next part you might find hard to believe, because I myself can't grasp that there are people out there like this. Within less of a minute after his appearance, he asked, "So, do you want to fuck?" I know you've probably heard situations like this 100 times, but think about the circumstances. I had just taken a nasty fall, so running would have been quite painful to do. I likely would have been captured. We were all alone on the trail. Sure, the showboat was still out in the water, but it was several football fields away by that point. No one on board would have seen us, and no one would hear me if I were to scream. I just knew I had to get off this trail. before the sun went down. Without missing a beat, I told him that it was too cold to do it outside, and that we should just go to my car, and obviously, I had abandoned capturing the sunset. I don't recall all the things he said during the walk up to the parking lot, but it was about what you would expect. How had I gotten myself into this awful situation? God, this is so stupid. Please, just let me make it out of this, and I swear I'll be smarter in the future. He then placed his hand on the back of my pants for the rest of the walk. Once we got to the parking lot, much to my disappointment, my car was still the only one there. There was another car, but it wasn't parked in a real spot, sort of off to the side, and it hadn't been there earlier. I just knew it was his car. He had been hiding and watching me, and left his car to follow me. You might ask why I didn't call the cops while I was out on the trail. Well, he was watching my every move, and I wanted to make it off the trail unharmed and alive. With the temperatures being below freezing, I figured it was a good excuse to refuse to do what he wanted to do out there on the trail. But making promises to do it elsewhere was the only way I would make it back to my car. Unfortunately, the parking lot was far enough away from the regular highway that passing cars wouldn't see us. The next thing I had to do was make it back to my SUV and escape. He continued going into detail about what he was going to do to me, which is too graphic for me to write about. I was still playing along. I tried to get his name and number out of him, but he refused on both. Why would someone refuse to give their name? We were still by his car. Let's just do this here. No, let's go to my car. There's a lot more room in there. Alright, I need to grab something real quick. He then grabbed something out of his car. I never got a good look at it, but I'm pretty sure it was a handgun. We then walked across the parking lot to my car. I pushed the unlock button, knowing that only pushing it once would only unlock the driver's side door. I had my keys ready. I jumped in, and as he was attempting to open the passenger door, I threw it in reverse and backed up as the tires spun on loose gravel. I then put it into drive and floored it. I was too afraid to look back in the rearview mirror. I immediately called 911 and gave them his description. Oddly enough, he was a handsome guy, stood about 6 feet tall, blonde hair, brown eyes, fair skin, a slightly muscular build, and nice features. Not the kind of creep you were probably imagining. He might have been around 25 or 30 years old. You wouldn't look at him and think anything remarkable or otherwise. I was never in a position to see his license plate, but I told the police about his car. It was probably something that you would see in the early 90s, pale blue in color. It reminded me of my great-grandmother's Oldsmobile. After taking down my information, I never heard from anyone regarding my report again. I may not know who he was or what he has done, but what I do know is that I was in the presence of pure evil that night. I heard you were looking for stories from the cesspool called Los Angeles. Unfortunately, we can't choose where we were born, and I have the distinct honor of being born and raised in the city of demons. I could go into the litany of experiences I've had being harassed by drug addicts, chased by gang members, or was almost in the crossfire of a shootout, but I feel like all of you listening have heard stories like this before. They are a sad reality, but it isn't something that really surprises you, right? We've sadly become accustomed to the violence that takes place in the streets of America, especially LA, and no one seems to have the solution to the problem. However, every once in a while, you hear a story that makes you pause and reflect on how fucked up it is. I'd like to think that this is one of those stories. Back in 2012, I worked for a small startup business that operated out of the St. Vincent Jewelry Center in downtown Los Angeles. I was an employee, but I was friends with the guys who founded the company, and I even shared an apartment with them. I didn't own a car at the time, but it usually wasn't an issue for me, because I could carpool with one of my roommates to and from work. That was until they had to attend a meeting in San Francisco. I told them not to worry, and that I would take a taxi to the office while they were away, or would find a ride with someone else. But I ultimately decided to walk to our office space. At the time, I was looking for ways to burn a certain amount of calories each day, and figured I could keep up with my fitness goals and save a trip to the treadmill by simply walking to work while my roommates were gone. The one downside was that the most direct path to the office took you straight through one of the worst areas of Skid Row. So, I would have to make sure to avoid this area. The day of, I walked to work, taking a route that avoided the danger zone. The only thing of note was seeing a homeless man passed out by a dumpster in an alley, a few blocks away from my apartment building. Work went well that day. It was a bit busier than usual with the bosses being gone. It ended up being a 12-hour shift, so by the time we were done, it was around 10 p.m. A co-worker named Kevin and I decided to stop at a bar to finish off the day. This worked out for me, because the place we went to was only a few blocks away from my apartment building, and would shorten the distance I had to walk. So we drive to the bar, had some drinks, and called it a night. He offered to drive me to my apartment, but I insisted that I would walk the rest of the way. I knew that Kevin lived in Inglewood, so the sooner he left, the better. I don't remember the exact street names, but I knew the way back to my apartment from where I was, and that I wasn't near Skid Row, so I began to make my way down the street. It was uncharacteristically quiet. You could still hear the soundscape of the city in the distance, but the dim lighting and the lack of pedestrians made me feel a bit uneasy. About 5 minutes into the walk, and about 3 minutes from my destination, I passed by the alley where I had seen the homeless man from earlier. It was your typical city alleyway with dumpsters, drain pipes, and loading docks. However, there was somebody by one of the dumpsters with their back turned to me, crouching down. From the looks of it, it appeared to be an adult woman with her hair tied back into a ponytail. As soon as I saw her, I instantly knew something was off. I could hear these strange sounds, like someone was tearing into a steak. I don't know why. Any other day I would have just kept walking, but I was compelled to see what this woman was doing. Maybe she was sick or something. I cautiously approached. As I did, the wet sound grew louder. When it was about 5 yards away, I cleared my throat and asked, "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman finally stopped what she was doing and stood up. She was wearing a pair of jeans and a light blue top. It didn't look like she was homeless. However, she did not turn around. I then heard her spitting something out. Without saying a single word to me, she took off down to the other side of the alley and disappeared. The alley was dark, and I had to use a small light on my keychain to see what the woman had been crouching over beside the dumpster. When I turned on my light, what I saw was the most disgusting and terrifying thing I have ever laid my eyes on. Lying on the ground was the homeless man from earlier, but his face was almost completely gone. It was just a bloody, gaping hole. Lying on his chest was his tongue. I instantly hunched over and vomited. I then ran the rest of the way back to my apartment and immediately told a security guard working in the lobby to call 911. I waited there for the police to show up so I could report what I saw. I never heard of any follow-ups or news reports about this incident, which is super surprising to me because that cannibal attack in Miami was big news around this time. But I guess the crackdown on gang-related violence was more of a priority for the LAPD back then. I had trouble sleeping for quite some time after this incident. The visage of that man's half-eaten face took a while for me to get over, and I still don't know what to make of what I saw in that dark alley. A seemingly normal-looking woman was crouched over a homeless man and was taking a bite out of him. I sometimes regret not seeing her face, so I could have gave the police a more accurate description of the suspect, but sometimes I'm glad she never turned around. Moral of the story? If you can hitch a ride with someone you trust in downtown LA, do it.
This happened almost 20 years ago, when I was 18 years old. I still lived with my parents, even though I had just graduated from high school. I had just bought a new laptop, and after I was done getting it set up, I posted my old one on Craigslist. It was only 2 years old, but back then, that meant it was pretty outdated. It was a Dell PC with decent specs, and it was almost $2,000 brand new. I was asking only $500, because newer laptops at the time were a lot better. After listing it online, I didn't have to wait long for a response. A guy named Corey messaged me, interested in the laptop, but wanting to see it first. I wanted to set up a time to meet the following week, when I would be downtown. That way we could meet at a coffee shop or something. When I suggested that, Corey said that he needed it right away. For that reason, I agreed to let him come over to my house. I knew it would be smarter to meet in a public place, but our house was in the suburbs, and I didn't have a car. I know it was lazy and stupid, but I gave him my home address. My parents weren't home, but I figured it would be a quick sale and didn't think anything would go wrong. Corey showed up later that day. It was a Saturday at around 7 p.m. I saw an older van pull into the driveway, and a man got out, but he wasn't alone. He had another guy with him. Both of them were at least 30 and much bigger than me. As soon as I saw them, I felt a little scared. Something about their presence felt off, but I brushed the feeling aside. After all, they were just there to look at a laptop. I let them in, and we set up in the kitchen. I began showing the laptop to Corey, and then his friend immediately asked me to use the bathroom. I pointed him in the right direction, which was just around the corner and down a short hallway. Then I focused on showing the laptop to Corey. About 10 minutes passed while we were looking at it. I had erased it beforehand, so it was basically running as new. Then I suddenly realized that the other man hadn't returned from the bathroom. "Hey, is your friend all right?" I asked Corey.
"Yeah, it can take a while sometimes. Don't worry,"
he reassured me. I listened as closely as I could and heard footsteps, but they weren't coming from the bathroom area. They were coming from upstairs. Since it was just the three of us in the house, I knew it was him. The bathroom is on the main floor, so there was no reason for him to be up there. That was when I started to panic internally, but I tried to hide it. I casually asked Corey about his friend again, hoping my nervousness wasn't showing. His response was cold and intimidating. He placed his hand on my shoulder, not in a friendly way, but with a lot of pressure. He told me not to worry about it. His grip tightened painfully, and in that moment, I knew this was more than just a sale gone wrong. We were being robbed. That was probably the plan from the beginning. Panic set in, but I tried to keep my composure. I told Corey to take whatever they wanted and just go, but he didn't let go. His grip on my shoulder felt hard. It was like a threat, and I started to shake. I knew I had to act fast. I managed to break away and ran to my dad's office on the main floor, locking the door behind me. I left my phone on the kitchen table, which was a stupid mistake. Luckily, though, there was a landline in the office where I was, so that saved me. My heart was pounding as I dialed 911, frantically explaining the situation to the dispatcher. The minutes waiting for the police to arrive were the longest of my life. I could hear the two men stomping around the house, probably stealing whatever they could find. They must have known the police were on their way, because they took off within minutes. I watched out the front window as they went back to the van on the driveway and sped away.
When I was sure they were gone, I came out to see what was taken. The only things I noticed missing on the main floor were the small TV in the kitchen and the laptop that I was selling. However, I later found out that most of my mom's jewelry was taken, as well as at least $200 in cash. The cops showed up about 10 minutes after the robbers left. They stayed for a while, but then they left without making any promises. It was pretty unsatisfying. That was the last I ever heard from the police about what happened. I reached out to them several times, but they never got back to me. When my parents and sister got home, I had to explain what happened. They all thought I was joking at first, because I have a dark sense of humor, but when they found out it was real, they were mad too. I would estimate the losses at around $3,000, which was a huge amount of money for me at the time. Since it was all my fault, I had to pay it back. That was basically my whole summer of work down the drain. It was the last time I met a strange person off the internet. If I were ever to do it again, there'd be no way I would let them come to my place. It's public or no deal, without any exceptions. About 10 years ago, I had a really creepy experience. I own my house, which is a duplex, and I live on one side while renting out the other. It's an old house that looks rough on the outside. The interior is nicely updated though. There are 3 bedrooms in each house, and only a single bathroom, which is at the top of the stairs. That's the same for my place, and for the rental. My tenants at the time were a young family, parents and 3 kids. They were great tenants, never late on rent, and always friendly. But as their family grew, so did their need for space. It was a tight fit for a family of 5, especially as the kids were getting older. From what I heard, they found a bigger house, but it was pretty far away in a new development, about 2 hours away. They had lived there for almost 5 years, so I was sad to see them go, but it was definitely for the best. When they moved out, they left a few things behind, an old kitchen table and a bunch of kids' toys. Before they went, the mother asked me if it was okay for them to leave those things there. They didn't have time to deal with them, so I was happy to let them leave it. Either I would sell them, or leave them for the next renters. Once they were gone, I went in to clean, paint, and do some minor repairs. In the middle of the room, there was an old kitchen table and a small pile of toys, presumably that the kids had grown out of. I realized right away that it wouldn't make much sense to leave them in the unit, so I put them on Craigslist that evening when I was done with my work. The table went quickly, but the toys didn't get as much interest. It took weeks before I got a message. A guy was interested, and we set up a time for him to come by and pick them up. I asked him to come on a Saturday afternoon, because I was going to be around all day. In the morning, I was in the rental finishing up some repairs, mostly just patching up some dings in the walls. By lunchtime, I was in my side of the duplex. That was when I heard a car pull up. Peeking out the window, I saw a beat-up old truck that looked like it was from the early 90s. It was loud, and I could see a faint cloud of smoke surrounding it. The guy who stepped out was a normal-looking middle-aged guy, average height, wearing a baseball hat and sunglasses. As he walked up to the house, I thought there was something off about him. He moved slowly, but other than that, I can't put my finger on why I was alarmed by him. When he finally came to the door, I had already walked up to it and went out. I went over and said hi.
Hi, I'm here for the toys,
he said. Sure, they're just inside, I replied, leading him into the rental where the toys were piled up. I motioned for him to come into the next room, but he didn't follow. Instead, he lingered in the doorway, eyes scanning the room.
Where are the kids?
He asked abruptly. They moved out, I told him. That's why we're selling the toys. His face then changed. It wasn't exactly disappointment, but more like annoyance.
I just wanted to say hi,
he muttered. I didn't say anything to that, just shot him an awkward smile, and tried to lead him into the room where the toys were. Again, he didn't come with me. He just stood in the doorway, pouting like a child. His interest in the kids was creepy, but I thought I could be being too paranoid. Do you still want the toys? I asked, hoping he would just take them and leave. I was only asking $20 for the lot, but I really just wanted them gone. Still standing in the doorway, his eyes were fixated on the floor when I looked back at him. But then he looked up and said no. Then he walked out without another word. At that moment, he still hadn't even seen the toys. It was very sudden the way he took off. The man didn't even pretend to be interested in the toys. I don't know if he was going to kidnap the kids or something. It's hard to see how he was planning that, since he knew there would be an adult there. Maybe he was coming to scope them out and make a move another time. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. After he left, I locked the door and stood there, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. I wondered if I should call the cops, but what would I say? A guy came to pick up some toys and asked a weird question. My brother-in-law is a police officer, so I called him to ask for advice. He told me that although the story was creepy, there wasn't anything that could be done. The reality is that no laws were broken. Still, I think that guy needed to be watched, and I worry about what he might get up to. This happened during the summer before my last year of college. I decided to transfer to a school outside my hometown, because I was ready for a change. Also, my new city was a better place to find a job, so I decided it would be better to go out there for my last year. Since I didn't know anybody out there, I needed to find a place before moving. My summer job went until the second last week of August, so it was tough to do that. In the evenings, I was searching online to find a place. I was getting desperate as time went on, so I was sending out a lot of messages, even for places where I didn't really want to live. I found a posting for a room that seemed pretty good though. Affordable, well located, and just the right size. The pictures were decent too. Nothing fancy, but clean and bright. It was a room in a house with roommates, all of whom were students at my school. I was excited about that, because I didn't have any friends in town. The landlord and I sent a few emails back and forth, then we talked on the phone. He said it was okay if we never met in person, but he wanted first and last month's rent before he would give me the place. I was nervous about that, but it seemed like there was no other choice. I wired the money as he asked. Then he sent me a lease to sign. It all looked legit. Once I signed it and sent it back, I was relieved that I finally had somewhere to live. My summer job ended just 2 weeks later, so I headed to my new home. The drive to my new city was long, about 8 hours. My car was filled up with everything I owned. When I finally pulled up to the address, the house before me looked just like I was expecting. It was old, but looked well maintained, for a student house anyway. I parked my car on the street, then grabbed my backpack from the passenger seat. I was expecting the landlord to be waiting for me, because I needed to get the keys. We talked mere hours before, so he knew when I was going to be there. I walked up to the house and rang the doorbell. After a minute, someone answered, looking at me in a confused way. The person who answered looked like a student around my age, one of my new roommates, I thought. I explained that I was there for the room, and asked if the landlord was there. The person then told me that I must have the wrong address, because there were no empty rooms in that house. I apologized and walked back to my car. Then I pulled out my phone to make sure the address was right. Everything matched up, so I didn't know what was going on. I tried calling the landlord, but he didn't answer. That's when it hit me. The guy I'd been talking to didn't own the house. He was a scammer who'd taken my money and left me stranded. I was out a lot of cash, with nowhere to stay, in a city where I knew no one. I felt foolish, angry, and utterly alone. I spent the next few hours at a local coffee shop, using their Wi-Fi to search for accommodation and to report the scam. I couldn't find anywhere to stay that wasn't way too expensive, so I spent the night in my car. Luckily, it was summer. The next day, I had a choice to make. I could either stay there and keep looking for a place, or I could drive home. Since school began in just over a week, the choice was simple. I needed to stay. Later that day, I reported the scam to the police and to Craigslist. I didn't have much hope of getting my money back, but when I talked to the police, they seemed to think that they could trace the money transfers that I used. They seemed to think the scammer might have been dumb enough not to consider it. That did little for me at the moment though, because my already tight budget was even worse. I spent the next 2 nights in my car, until a place finally came up. It was a room in a large basement apartment, with 6 roommates, several of them sharing rooms. It was a real dungeon-looking kind of place, but it was better than my car. The rent was cheap, but it was definitely the worst place I've ever lived. In the end, I did get my money back, and the fake landlord was caught. As the officer told me, They were able to trace the money transfer to a throwaway email address that was linked to the guy's real address. It was simple enough for the cybercrimes unit. I don't think he did any prison time, but he got some probation and a fine. That's good enough, I guess. I was just glad to get my money back. I went to college from 2006 until 2010, and this happened in the summer between my first and second year. I had spent the first 3 months of the break working for my dad, but our contract ended at the beginning of August. With no more work, I decided to move to the city where I was going to school and spend the last month of my break there. My friends and I had a house that we were already paying rent for, so that's where I was going to go. I had 2 roommates, and neither of them were in town yet, so I was basically alone almost every day. Most of my time was spent binge-watching the TV show Lost on my laptop. That got old after a while, so I started looking for work. Since it was only about a month before school started, I couldn't really find a full-time job. Instead, I was after random odd jobs on Craigslist and our school's message board. I had done a few days of work here and there. One guy hired me for the day to clean up some construction mess, mostly just sweeping up after the contractors left. Another time, I spent a day helping somebody who trims old trees, just random stuff like that. I was at home one day, scrolling through Craigslist, when I saw another posting. Someone needed help moving. It seemed pretty straightforward, so I shot them a message. The reply came quickly, and we arranged to meet the following day. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another day of work, hopefully. He picked me up in a large white van. We exchanged hellos and brief pleasantries. He told me his name was Jim, and then we went off. As we drove, he didn't say much. Just the occasional nod and grunt in response to my attempts at small talk. Not a big deal or anything, but it was uncomfortable. He seemed awkward, but that was fine. We were on the highway for at least half an hour, and I didn't know the neighborhood we were in. It looked nice though, new at least. We pulled up to a house in a neighborhood that looked like all the others. It was a real cookie-cutter neighborhood, where each house was one of 2 or 3 different designs. It was obvious that it was new, because some of the houses were still under construction. I got the impression that most of them weren't occupied yet, because few of the houses had any cars parked in the driveway, and I didn't see many other cars or people walking. The one we pulled up to was a 2-story gray brick house with a 2-car garage. There were no lights on that I could see, and the curtains were all closed. He parked in the driveway, and we both got out. I headed to the front door, expecting him to follow and ring the doorbell. But he didn't. Instead, Jim told me to wait and disappeared around the back. I remember thinking it was odd, but waited anyway. Maybe he was checking if the back door was unlocked or something. Finally, he reappeared and opened the front door from inside, motioning for me to come in. The house was nice, but something was off. There were no boxes, no packing tape, none of the usual moving chaos. It looked like a really nice, almost perfect house. It was spotless, and it had the feel of a model home. We started with the TV, a big bulky thing that took both of us to carry, then some furniture. We carried them out to the van, and before I knew it, we were full. There was a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach the whole time, though. I knew something wasn't right. Since it was such a new area, why would anybody be moving out? Stuff happens, but that was definitely strange. Also, for how much stuff there was, it would probably take us another 10 van loads at least. When we were heading back to the van, I was really suspicious of Jim. Come to think of it, I had no proof that he was even working for the people who owned the house. I didn't know how he got in through the back, but if he had a key, then why not use it on the front door? I wanted to get out of there and call the cops, because I was almost sure that this was a robbery. I pulled out my flip phone and pretended to read a text message. Then I turned to Jim and said something important came up, but he was on to me. I made a break for it, bolting down the street. I could hear him shouting behind me. I looked back and saw him get into the van as I was running down the street. I sprinted faster, and the sound of the van was close behind. I went through some yards, hopping over fences, anything to put distance between me and that van. I lost him after a couple blocks, then ducked behind a shed and waited until the sound of the van faded. Once I felt safe, I called the cops from my Motorola Razr flip phone. They confirmed the worst. The house's owners hadn't moved in yet. Their stuff was set up by the moving company and an interior decorator, but they weren't even in the country. I'd unknowingly helped in a robbery. At that moment, I thought I could get in trouble for what I did. I asked the police over the phone if I was in trouble, but they assured me that since I didn't know, I would be fine, especially since I called in to report it. After interviewing with the cops, I told them everything I knew. I didn't have the license plate for the van, but with the information I gave them, they were able to track down several sources of security footage. With that, they caught both the van's license plate and several images of myself with Jim. Jim was obviously not his real name, but he was caught later that day. He was arrested, and the stuff was brought back to the house. We also found out that this was not his first visit to that place. He had been robbing that house every day for almost a week. The neighbors didn't notice, because everyone was new. I guess he made off with some smaller things, then he got greedy and needed help. That's where I came in. Jim could have quit while he was ahead, but he wanted more, and he got caught because of that.